Thank you. Yeah. Ready?
Yep.
I'm going to call to order. This is the June 23rd, 2020 Special City Council meeting on the Joliet Alternative Water Source Program. Kristen, can you read the roll, please?
Sure. Mayor Odekirk,
Here.
Councilman Dickinson,
Here.
Councilwoman Gavin, Councilman Hug, Councilman Morris, absent. Councilman Mudrin. Hard to hear from outdoors. Councilwoman Quillman,
Here.
Councilwoman Reardon,
Here.
Councilman Turk.
Here.
First on the agenda this evening is the Alternative Water Source Workshop. Mayor and Council, we're pleased to be here tonight for what's going to be the first of 3 workshops we have scheduled in 2020 for the Alternative Water Source Program. I know there's a lot on the agenda tonight, but we want to spend quite a bit of time this evening getting your input. So we hope to have these presentations we have on the agenda, and then also allow time to have discussion amongst the council members. So I'm just going to jump right in. So this evening you'll be hearing from myself, as well as Joe Johnson from Stantec and Teresa O'Grady with Crawford, Murphy & Tilley. In April, the contract with Stantec was approved for the Alternative Water Source Program, and both Joe and Teresa are the project managers for the program. So briefly, just want to go over the workshop agenda. So first, I'm going to provide a brief overview of the program background, and then also discuss in more detail the work that is going to be completed in 2020. I'm going to then turn the presentation over to Joe, and he's going to discuss how we identify, quantify, and eventually then how we manage risk. So he's also going to be discussing a tool that we recently conducted by members of the city that was on risk. So we'll be spending a lot of time tonight talking and understanding complexities associated with uncertainty and risk. And then after Joe's presentation, we're going to spend, and as you can see, we have 45 minutes set aside having this group discussion. And we really want to, it's important that we get your input now. We want to understand what concerns you have with the program in general, as well as both of the alternatives that are being evaluated. And we really want to see, what challenges you foresee, and then how we can help, address those in the work that we're doing in 2020. So again, we hope we have a very open dialogue, and please feel free to, ask any questions or express any concerns that you have. Then after that discussion, Teresa O'Grady is going to discuss what we're calling a prospectus, and that is the format that we're going to be providing to the council in November, basically providing to you the evaluation that's completed for both of the alternatives. And so that's really going to be, the information you're going to be receiving. And so then after that presentation, we're going to, again, have another group discussion and get your input on the information that we're going to provide to you. We want to make sure that what we're going to provide in this prospectus is going to provide you with the information, so that come November, this decision can be made at the end of the year. Okay, so we've identified 3 major goals for the workshop tonight. It's very important that we get the information from you now in June, so that come November we're able to provide you again with the information that will be the basis for the decision on the alternative source of water. So the goals we've identified are first, just providing an update on the program and informing you of what we're working on. And the second goal would be finding out what concerns you have about the program in general, as well as the 2 specific alternatives that are being evaluated. And then third, again, providing you with this prospectus outline, informing you of the information that will be provided in November. All Right, so I just wanted to start off with providing this background information. I know for the council, you've seen this before, and it won't be new information. However, we do have, I know people at home who are watching, and so I do want to spend some time just kind of going through the background again. I'm really happy to report that we currently have over 1,000 stakeholders who are signed up to on our stakeholder list, and they receive notifications of these meetings and are very interested in participating. So again, just want to briefly take some time to go over the program background. So again, our current problem, we have known with updated modeling completed by the Illinois State Water Survey that our current water source, which is the deep aquifer, is not sustainable, and that we need to find a new source and have that source online by 2030 in order to meet our demands. With this, we knew that we needed to conduct a study to identify what that new water source alternative should be. It was important to kind of start from the beginning and look at all possible alternatives. So this study was conducted in 2 phases. The first phase was conducted in 2018 and evaluated 14 different water source alternatives and mostly focused on water quality and water quantity. From that evaluation, 5 different alternatives were advanced then to phase 2 for a more in-depth evaluation. Those options included the Illinois River, the Kankakee River, and then 3 variations on Lake Michigan water. And all of those scenarios were evaluated for both a 30 MGD and a 60 MGD demand scenario. From the beginning, it's been recognized that this might not only be a solution for Joliet, but also the region as a whole. So with that evaluation that was presented to the council last November, and then in January, there was the selection of Lake Michigan water, as well as the direction to do a simultaneous investigation in 2020 of the 2 Lake Michigan alternatives on the screen, the new Indiana intake and the Chicago Department of Water Management options. So that is where we are today, and so I'm going to briefly just describe those alternatives that are being studied further in 2020. The first alternative is the Lake Michigan new Indiana intake. This consists of constructing a new intake on the south side of Lake Michigan, and then constructing about 47 miles of transmission main to convey raw water to a new water treatment plant that is currently proposed to be located on the eastern side of Joliet. The capital costs range from $900 million to $1.1 billion, depending on if this is a Joliet-only or a regional solution. We then broke that down into typical monthly water bill increases, and it should be noted that these are increases above and beyond the current monthly water bill, which is approximately $30. And again, these are in $20-30. And for the Indiana intake alternative, it ranges from about $68 to $56. So as you can see, there is potential savings to our Joliet's customers with a regional solution given economies of scale. It should be noted that with this option, the 50-year total cost is less than it is with the purchased water option, which I'll describe in more detail next. So major differentiators, this option does give the city control over the water rates and implementation. However, there's greater implementation risk due to the project complexity. And those are 2 items that we're exploring further in 2020. The next alternative is the option to purchase water from the Chicago Department of Water Management. This alternative consists of constructing a transmission main beginning at the southwest pump station, which is at approximately 84th and Kedvale in Chicago, constructing 30 miles of transmission main to convey the finished water to the eastern side of Joliet. Capital costs for this option range from $450 million to $650 million, depending on if it's a regional solution or Joliet alone. And then the typical bill increase is slightly less than the Indiana option, ranging from $60 to about $52. However, the 50-year total cost, when you look at the complete life cycle of the infrastructure, is greater than with the Indiana option. So this option, there's less risk because it's an existing water supplier. and there's a lower initial monthly bill increase, but then there is not control over the water system since we'll be purchasing water from the city of Chicago. One variation that we do want to point out tonight is that in our discussions with the city of Chicago, they have presented another option, which would be the city would construct, own, operate, and maintain the transmission main from the Southwest Pumping Station to Joliet. So that's another option that we're further discussing with them, and we can provide you with more information as those discussions continue. But we did want to bring that up, that might be a variation that is presented in November, that there's an option in which the city would extend their system out to Joliet. Okay, so just overall the program schedule. Again, in 2020, we're doing the alternative evaluation with an anticipated final selection at the end of this year. We would then move into preliminary design in 2021, final design in 2022 through 2024, and there would be about a 5-year construction period in 2025 to 2030. We do feel that with either of the alternatives, we can meet the ultimate deadline of 2030 to have the new water source online. And again, more schedule details will be provided in November with the prospectus documents. So I do want to go through a month-to-month schedule just so that you're aware of the activities that we are conducting. There's a lot of work to be done in 2020, so I've kind of boiled this down and taken away a lot of the technical details to kind of hit the highlights. So as I mentioned, in April, we selected the design team that will be managing the program. We've been having ongoing meetings with both the City of Chicago and the City of Hammond to discuss water supply and water access agreements. We've been having a lot of meetings with regulatory agencies, IEPA, IDNR, Indiana Department of Environmental Management. So we had a lot of ongoing discussions with those regulatory agencies. We did host the regional planning kickoff meeting, so we're already engaging potential regional partners, and we're currently in the process of having one-on-one meetings with those communities so that we can gather information from them about their interest in a regional water system. We've been issuing a monthly newsletter, and really the monthly newsletter is kind of also providing this month-to-month summary. So we recommend that everyone sign up to receive the newsletter, and if you're watching at home, you can do that by going to the project website, and we'll have more information on that at the end. We also did conduct this PESTLE analysis, which Joe will be talking about in more detail during his presentation. So this month, we're here having the first workshop. We also, a major highlight of June, is planning to submit the Lake Michigan allocation application. It's a big question on a lot of people's minds is, will Joliet qualify for, to receive Lake Michigan water? And we've had conversations with, IDNR that manages that application process, and we've, confirmed with them that we're going to be submitting the application, and we anticipate then by this fall we will, have that process, through its completion and have that question answered. Then in July, we're going to have our second stakeholder meeting. So this is an opportunity for the public and any other stakeholders to be engaged in the project. We're planning to have that on July 30th, and more information about that will come out later. We're also at a staff level doing an evaluation of regional governance structures, and we'll be looking to present our recommendation to the council at the second workshop in August about what a governance structure could look like for a regional water system. And also in July, we're really focusing on this transmission main routing study. A lot of the questions that came up last year was about the route that the transmission main would take, and really during the phase 1 and phase 2 study was very conceptual. However, this year we're really looking into a lot more details on what that route would be, so that we can make sure that we've identified any red flags and kind of have better cost information on the transmission main routing. So then in August, we'll plan to have the second City Council workshop. That workshop will provide a lot of the technical information that we've been working on. Again, presenting what the proposed transmission main routing would be for both of the alternatives, discussing the regional governance structure and what's recommended by staff, I'm talking about the water treatment plant, which would be a component of the Indiana option. I know there's a lot of questions about what treatment methods we would use, what standards we would treat to, and so we would really want to present that to the council so that you have that information available to you. We also are having quarterly meetings with the Finance Committee, so we'll have another update to the Finance Committee in August. Okay, throughout this time we've been mentioning that we've been ongoing discussions with the City of Chicago and City of Hammond. And so we would look to have those tentative agreements in place with both entities in September so that information can then be factored in to the cost information that will be presented to the council in November. So we do expect that by this fall we will have those details of what an agreement, what the terms and conditions would be with both of those entities to either purchase water or have access to the lake. So I know that's another question that a lot of people have had, is what those agreements would look like. In October really is when we kind of pull together all of the evaluation that we've been working on. We're going to compile it into these deliverables that are listed here. We're going to have a funding strategy that will be presented to the Finance Committee in October. Also preparing these prospectus documents, and also the basis of design. The basis of design is kind of the guts of the whole evaluation from a technical perspective. So the prospectus is going to be a boiled down document that will be very public facing, but then all the technical details of the evaluation will be in that basis of design. In November, we'll then have our third City Council workshop, which would present the evaluation of the alternatives and these prospectus documents. And that information will be submitted to both of those documents will be submitted to the council so you can review them. In December, we're planning to have another public forum similar to what we had last year. This will be the opportunity for the public to come and voice their opinions regarding the water source alternatives. And then we would seek to have the City Council decision at the end of the year. That would then allow for us to move into 2021 with executing either a water supply or water access agreement and beginning preliminary design. So again, this is a lot of information in 2020. We do need to maintain this schedule given the magnitude of the amount of work that has to be done. So we're really looking to focus in on making that decision this year. I know it's a very big decision to make, which is really why tonight we want to focus on making sure we understand what information that you're going to need to make the decision in that time frame. So I just want to close with mentioning to the public who might be watching is that we do have all these opportunities to get involved, and we do encourage everyone to get involved. As I mentioned earlier, you can sign up for our email list. You can do that by going to our website, which is rethinkwaterjoliet.org. Hopefully able to have public meetings soon, which the public can attend. And then also, spreading the word and becoming educated by reading our monthly newsletter, which includes the 2 educational topics. And we do put a lot of effort into writing those educational topics so that people who have questions about more the technical details of the program can understand that. So I'll just pause briefly right now if there's any questions about the program in general or the work we're doing in 2020. If not, I can turn it over to Joe to start talking about the risks. Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Joe Johnson. I'm with Stantec and the project manager for the Alternative Water Source Program this year. I appreciate your time. As Allison said, I want to take a few minutes tonight and talk with you about uncertainty, because this is going to be an issue as we work through this decision. While there's a tremendous amount of work being done to define specific elements and aspects of this program, even at the end of this year, there are going to be things that we can control and things that we can't control. Understanding how we want to quantify those and provide you with information so that you can consider them in your decision is important to us. When we talk about uncertainty and risk, I guess an easy way to think about risk is uncertainty that matters. There are some things that we may not know. We may not know exactly what street water main is going to go down at the end of this year. As long as there's an alternative to that street, that's not really a big deal. On the other hand, if we don't know what the terms and conditions of an agreement or how much the cost of water may change over time or what certain permitting requirements are going to be, that is a big deal that we need to understand and quantify. So our approach to risk analysis uses the information we know to predict what we're going to do in the future and how to manage that. We'll be putting together a risk management program for the overall water implementation plan. And then that'll be adapted over time to make sure that we have a strategy for refining things and trying to limit that uncertainty and making good decisions as we go through. A question that comes up in a lot of circumstances for us is how much risk can we tolerate? And this kind of gets to our discussion tonight when Allison comes out and leads you through some of the question discussion. We want to kind of understand what are the risks or the concerns that you have about the alternatives that keep you up at night. You know, what are the things that you worry about when you think about how are you going to make this decision? Again, there are lots of things that we deal with and lots of the details we can tie down and provide a lot of information around. Even things that are uncertain, we can help to quantify those and bring them together. So we want to make sure we understand what those items are that are particularly important to you. We use a very structured process to manage the risk as we go through the project. We start out with identifying the risks. We do a qualitative assessment to kind of understand what are high risks, what are low risks. As we identify the priority risks, then we can get more quantitative and figure out, put some parameters around those and start to rank them. We can then plan how we're going to respond to the risks and then work to monitor them over the course of the project. And then we iterate on that. So periodically, we'll be reviewing the risk program within the team and looking to see what adjustments do we need to make. Do we need to reprioritize things? Do we need to adapt our program? At this phase of the project, we're in this risk identification stage. And as Allison talked about, we use a tool called a PESTLE analysis. And PESTLE is really nothing more than a mnemonic. It's a reminder, if you will, of certain categories that risks may come under. The letters stand for political, economic, social, technical, legislative, and environmental. And while it's not necessarily comprehensive, it does provide kind of a broad base to think about what are the issues and concerns we have in these different categories. The way the analysis works is we bring together a group of people that represent a cross-section of thoughts and ideas about the project. We review the project so everybody has a consistent understanding. We then ask each of the participants to brainstorm, to come up with what their risks are in each of these categories. We go through and then group those risks by category, work to consolidate them, turn them into risk statements, review them with the group, and then rank them so that we come up with a good idea from, again, a cross-section of people. What are the risks that are of concern that we need to focus energy on? Part of that process is figuring out how do we describe a risk, and really the risk it consists of four components. One is a threat, so what's the hazard or the circumstance that creates the risk? What's the condition? Why is it a risk? What's the challenge it poses? What's the event that could bring it to bear and it could cause it to either affect our budget or our schedule? And then lastly, what is the impact if the risk occurs? So you might think about a situation if in the course of constructing a water main we encounter contaminated soil. So that's the hazard. The condition is that we have to deal with that soil differently than we would with clean soil. The event is we then have to arrange for that disposal and calculate the cost and the impact on our schedule. And that affects the overall project in terms of what is the delay that creates in the implementation of that portion of the project. And you can imagine with a lot of different pieces, there are many different potential risks here. So back in late May, we gathered a group of about 18 folks, including 2 representatives from the council. So Councilwoman Reardon and Councilman Hugg participated with us. 10 city staff from a range of departments within the city, and then 6 members of the consultant team from different firms that are participating in the program. We went through this process, and as you can imagine, the brainstorming generated more than 300 different issues. There was a lot of overlap there, so we were able to consolidate those down, about 4 to 6 major themes per category. And we ended up with 30 risk statements that are somewhat general but describe the key risks that group came up with. All the participants were then asked kind of as homework to take that list home and to go through and rank it. And we compiled all those rankings, and after you have a chance to kind of talk through your concerns, we'll share those results and we can kind of see how that matches up. But we felt it was a very helpful process to go through and again get the perspective of people who are very engaged in the project from a technical point of view, as well as folks from the city who are worried about it from how does it affect the finances of the city, how does it affect the residents, and all the different components. So we certainly appreciate the involvement of people in that session. Once we have those risks and we start to try to quantify them, we really look at two aspects of a risk. One is how likely is it to occur? If it's very likely, then that's something we definitely need to plan for. And we also then look at the consequence. How serious is the impact if it does occur? So as you can see kind of on this chart, if you have a risk that's very likely but has a significant consequence, that's in that red area, that's something that we obviously need to work out, we need to plan for, have contingency plans, and be prepared to address as part of the project. On the other hand, we could have something that has, maybe it's fairly likely, but really doesn't have much of a consequence. That may still show up on our list, but probably doesn't warrant the energy. So this gives us a way to prioritize those things and make sure that we're focusing our effort on the aspects of the project that are important. In order to do that, what the team uses is something called a risk register. And this is really just an inventory of the risks, but we take that same template, if you will, and we put some numbers to it so that we can quantify those risks and start to rank them. So again, you can see the likelihood indices on the left-hand side and the consequences across the bottom. And then as an example, one entry in that risk table or risk register might look like this. It might be associated with if we have difficulty in defining a final transmission main alignment because we have to deal with lots of entities between Joliet and Chicago or Indiana. That could create delays in the process, having to deal with all those people. We've assigned a likelihood and impact, calculated a risk, and then we started to look at how would we mitigate that. As I said, right now our risk register has somewhere over 50 different items in it. We're in the process of kind of categorizing those, so we focus on the most important ones, and that'll continue to be reviewed as we work through the project. So what do we do once we know about these risks and we've categorized them? Well, there are a variety of different approaches we can take. The ideal one is if we can avoid it. For example, if we identify in the analyses right now that there is an area that would be difficult to construct water mains for whatever reason, and we want to go around that. Or if there's a community that might be difficult to work with, we might try to work a route that goes around that. We can look at sharing the risk. So there may be ways, if we're working with partners in the course of this, is there a way to distribute the risk so that maybe Joliet doesn't bear all of that? Sometimes that rolls into either contract agreements or contract documents that we might prepare with a contractor to figure out how do we share some of the risk that goes with constructing these facilities. Mitigation of risks is really the primary method that we use, and that's looking at seeing how can we either reduce the likelihood or reduce the consequence of it. So are there things that we can do to manage that risk and make the impact less? Lastly, in some cases, there are risks that we identify that we can't avoid or share or mitigate. We have to accept them. In those cases, it's critical that we have a plan that says, okay, how are we going to deal with that risk? Usually that involves setting aside some contingency or some budget so that we're prepared for that. It's planning for the worst case there. And then ideally, we can close risks out. So over the life of the project, a lot of our planning risks that we're dealing with right now, a year or two down the road, those go away and we'll be more focused on construction risks. So we try to keep it to a manageable pool of items we're dealing with. So that gives you a little bit of background on kind of the risk process. I'm happy to answer some questions. The next step, back in, and she's going to go through some questions that we would like to pose to you about, first of all, the program in general, and then about the two alternatives individually. Kind of get your feedback on what some of your concerns or what you see as the major risks there. After we've gone through that, I'll come back in real briefly and share the results with you from that PESTLE analysis and kind of see how those match up, and that will give us a bit of a way to calibrate where we are right now, and are we focusing on the risks that are most important to you in making your decision. So before I bring Allison back in, any questions on kind of the concept and the approach here?
No.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks to Joe for presenting on the concept of risk. He is ahead of schedule, so we're all happy to know that we're trying to move along quickly tonight. So it gives us more time to have kind of what I think is the most important part of the evening is this discussion right now to really understand what risks you foresee. Joe mentioned political risks, economic risks, social, technical, environmental. There's, like I said, we've already identified over 50 risks on this program that we would have to look to mitigate. So, this discussion now is really meant to, identify the risks and concerns that the council has regarding the program in general, and then also the two specific alternatives that we're evaluating, and then that feedback that you provide us tonight. Again, I can't impress again about how valuable it is that we will then use that to make sure that we're providing, that within the evaluation. So I emailed these out last week, but the first question is, what do you see as the greatest challenge to the final selection of a water source alternative for Joliet this year? So as Joe mentioned, both Councilman Reardon and Councilman Hug participated in our PESTLE analysis. So Councilman Reardon, if you wouldn't mind going first, I know you probably have more time to think about this than the others. So.
Well, we probably also have an unfair advantage because if you were in that meeting, by the time you left, you thought there was nothing but problems. Really. But that's what we were trying to do, was identify anything that could possibly go wrong. And in my opinion, it all came down to all of those things that could go wrong were going to affect the cost. So it's still at that level, and I think most people in the town are always asking about the cost the most. So any risks involved with problems we might have are going to most likely affect cost.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I'm at still.
Okay. All right, Councilman Mudron.
I think it's been said a number of times, and Sherry just said it again. Any of the people in the city of Joliet have come to me and says, have we looked at cost yet? And I said, it's part of the equation, and it's pretty far down the line. There is going to be an increase in cost. Obviously, this could be a lot closer to 300%, but I don't know that we, the city, have any other funding options to offset that cost for individuals who would fall at a level that couldn't afford this. But I realize those answers or options are further down the line.
Yeah, and I think, given that, the feedback we got about cost is I might have, after we go around, have Joe come back in and kind of talk about kind of what we talked about at the Finance Committee about what our funding strategy is. And we're also on the advocacy side, as you were talking about affordability, $90 a month for a water bill for some, low-income residents is not affordable. So we are, there's a lot of work being done right now to advocate for the LIHEAP program, which provides assistance to low incomes for heating and electrical assistance for those utility bills, to expand that to water utilities. So we'll be sure to continue to advocate for that and provide updates. But that's just one of the ways we're looking to potentially mitigate that risk.
I realize price is always going to be huge, but it can be overcome on the plan and how we're going to get there, and how we're going to offset that, and how we're going to help everybody to be able to afford it. Then all the things you're mentioning that we're being worked on.
Okay, great. Councilman Gavin?
I think cost is the most important piece right now that's out there, and I'm hearing from my two colleagues that they're saying about the same thing. So let me shift over to one, is the political side of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And that kind of gives me a little bit pause as well as we work through these agreements, and want to know what is there that could possibly either stop us or delay us as it relates to the political side of it. So that's a big concern as well.
Yeah, and that's why we really wanted to have these, very in-depth conversations with both Chicago and potential partners in Indiana, because we didn't want to come back in November and say, yeah, we think we could have an agreement. No, we actually intend to, have those fully negotiated and have those terms and conditions available this fall to present to you, so those risks associated, we would look to mitigate them through those contracts. And, of course, that is a major concern that a lot of people have, so. Okay. Councilman Dickinson?
Yeah, the number one thing that people come up to me about is, like, they want the Lake Michigan water, but they're also in fear of the cost. But that's already been said. But is there any towns, like, in the path, whatever path we choose, is there any towns that could just throw up a roadblock and say, no, you're not coming through here?
Yes, so that is, another major risk that was identified when we were doing the PESTLE analysis, is what do you do? And as, Joe briefly mentioned, that's part of this transmission main routing study that we're doing to, look at what corridors we could utilize that would minimize the amount of exposure for that. And, really trying to identify potential governance structures that could assist with enabling the use of eminent domain to, mitigate the risk for that. But that is definitely a concern. And sometimes it's just having the ability, well, if this route doesn't work, having the ability to shift to an alternative route. So that would be part of that, mitigating that risk too.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Councilman Hung?
Well, we got quite a few challenges. Certainly cost is something which really have to keep a lid on as tight as possible through creative financing, maybe through new account charges. We've discussed that. Somebody 30 years from now that moves here would pay an upfront charge, so that people didn't pay for their water ahead of time. But all the challenges share one thing, so I think the umbrella challenge is time. Everything is, we're on a compressed time frame. Anything that is considered a challenge or a risk can be mitigated or solved if you give it enough time. Well, we have a set amount of time. So as far as time is going to be the biggest challenge in getting an agreement amongst the council. Time is going to be the challenge in getting an agreement with other municipalities, right-of-ways and the path. Time will be, is important in setting up partners up front with whatever deal we structure to make them partners instead of customers, and customers down the road. So I really say right now, time is our big challenge.
Yeah, I think it's a very important topic to bring up, because we get asked a lot of times, oh, this is 10 years from now, like we have time, why are we spending all this money now to figure this out? But like you said, this is not, regardless of which alternative is selected, it's still complex, and it will take time to like you said, to be able to mitigate those risks and implement the project. So I think everyone on our project team, and I know the council's been very supportive of this, is that we can't stop. We do need to move forward with this, and we find that making this decision this year is very important to maintaining that schedule and the momentum we have, because a lot of the steps that you mentioned we can't begin to do until we make this decision of which route we're going. So, okay, Mayor.
Thank you for tonight putting this together. I think the biggest challenge I see is the reliability of our decision. I've said this a lot. If we're back at the table 20 or 30 years from now, that's a monumental failure by the city council and staff. So I think we have to make a choice that's going to be sustainable for as long as the current water system that we've been on has been, so over 100 years. I think that's how we should be looking at it. So it is going to be an increased cost. Councilman Mudgeon's right. And obviously we'll do what we can to mitigate that, but ultimately we have to put something in place that's going to be good for generations, in my opinion.
Yes, I mean that, when selecting Lake Michigan itself, that was a first big step in emphasizing the importance of sustainability. So I think, the council's already demonstrated that importance of doing that. So, Councilman Coleman?
Well, besides time and money, I think some of the citizens don't quite believe that we need to do this with all the rain we've had. They think that the aquifers are filling up. Why are we going to waste all this money doing this? But they forget the droughts that we've had when Kankakee was way, way down, and I think we were on some water restrictions back then. But having said that, I think besides the other municipalities possibly not giving us a right of way, the other challenge that I see here is getting some of them come on board with us that don't have Lake Michigan water and might want it, or we could offer to them and they could help share in the cost. And I just think that's another challenge that we have.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought up, I always take the opportunity to help educate people about the situation with the aquifer, because I think there is a misunderstanding that when it rains that the aquifer recharges. And that happens for shallow aquifers, that when it rains, it percolates into the ground, into the aquifer. But for our aquifer, it's over 1,000 feet in the ground, and it's due to the geology. When it rains, that water does not recharge back into the aquifer. So regardless of the weather, the aquifer is not sustainable. We just had updated modeling completed by the State Water Survey, and they further confirmed that really 2030 is this date that the city needs to have the new source. So just wanted to take that opportunity to mention that. As far as the regional participation, we've been having a lot of really good phone calls over Zoom with potential regional partners. The State Water Survey has come out with updated modeling, not only for Joliet, but also the other communities who are on the deep aquifer in the region. So, we've been having those conversations. There is interest. Again, the timing of it, we need to be in a position to, be able to provide those communities with information so that they can make a decision. So that's why in August, we really want to start talking about what a governance structure would look like for a regional water system. And then, we have a timeline with those communities that we would, seek them to make a commitment by the end of 2021. So we do have a timeline for that, and we think that through the outreach that we're doing, we'll be able to provide the council then with the input that we're receiving from them. We're asking questions, about, would you want to participate if it was Chicago versus Indiana? Would you want to participate if it was as a customer or as a commission? So we are asking those questions now so that we can provide you with that feedback, so that when you make this decision, you'll have that, that regional interest information available. So, Councilman Turk?
What I'm hearing, like everybody else is the cost factor. But let me ask you one question. So are we doing this risk analysis on the two Lake Michigan sites right now?
That's correct.
Okay. And say, for example, at the end of the research that there was just too much risk versus the cost at the end of that time, then do we go to the other alternate sources and take another look at them?
Yes, we don't envision that either of the Lake Michigan alternatives would be ruled out completely based on the risk analysis. I think we will present that, and of course then if it was found that neither one, there were significant issues that we could go back. However, I think based on the evaluation we completed during phase 2, certain options just aren't really options to consider. The staff recommendation only identified Lake Michigan and the Illinois River as 2 viable options, given the water demands that are needed by the city. So,
Okay, and then the current aquifer we're on, how many communities in this area draw off it?
So the current, I can just list a few: Shanahan, Shorewood, Manuka, I believe Lamont, and then Romeoville. And a couple other communities like Lockport have a couple wells. A lot have a mixture of both shallow and deep, but we also have then in Kane County, Oswego, Yorkville, Montgomery. So those are the communities that we've been doing outreach to.
But we're by far the largest, right?
We are by far the largest, yes. If you took all of the communities that we're considering in this regional approach, it's about 90 million gallons a day. Joliet would be 30 million gallons a day. We don't anticipate that we would get to the point where everyone would decide to participate within this next, 10-year timeframe, which is why we're kind of looking at the 30 and 60 options. So 60 would be some portion of, those communities participating. So, but we think we'll have a better idea of that by this fall of, who's more seriously considering it.
And then the only other question would be if, over the years when we've talked water rate increases, even 2-3%, I think maybe one time it was 5 or a little over, was met with a lot of resistance. And I surely understand the long-term source is what we really need, but there's going to have to be some kind of a funding source out there other than, tripling water bills, because I don't think that's going to go over too well either.
Yeah, and what again, those bills that we presented, that would be in 2030. So what we're doing as part of this year's evaluation, we're working with our rate consultant to start looking at what potential rate models would be. Do we want to slowly begin to implement those rates so that it's not, one big increase, and how we would look to do that. So we'll definitely present that information too, with some options as to how we would look to move forward with rates. The council last year approved already trying to build in that extra 2% to start setting money aside for this program, and that was able to help try and tamp down those future rate increases. So
Okay, thank you.
okay.
Allison,
Yes.
just one more question. You talked about in your opening presentation, you talked about a third alternative. You were going to get back to that. Is it time for you to talk about that now, or will you come back on
Yes, so when we met with the City of Chicago, and they presented this last year in their response to our request for information, there was an option, and this is first time Chicago has ever considered this option, is that they would build the transmission main to Joliet. They would own, operate, and maintain that transmission main. And if they did this, there would be a higher rate then that we would pay for the water. So it's definitely an option that's on the table. We're, vetting it out with them to understand, what that rate would be. But
I'm sorry.
No, I do anticipate that we will present that to the council in November as another alternative. It would be, similar to, it would be, some of the pros would be we wouldn't have to operate or maintain any infrastructure outside of Joliet. So that would be definitely a pro. The con is you have no control over that pipeline then.
You just answered my
Yes.
question. That was the second part of it. Okay.
Yeah.
I like control. Okay.
Yes. Okay. So the next two questions we're going to ask, and we'll just have you answer them at the same time, is specifically related to the two different alternatives. While they're both Lake Michigan water sources, there's still two very different alternatives. One being purchasing water from the City of Chicago, and the other one building the new infrastructure to Indiana and having a new water treatment plant that would be operated by the city or a regional entity. So I think this time, Councilman Hogg, if you don't mind, I'll start with you if you want to answer those two questions.
Sure. My greatest concern, well, there's two concerns combined. For the Chicago option is the loss of control over rates, being the consideration of Chicago's financial situation will always be impacted on what they need to charge customers at some point. And then ultimately the real possibility of selling it like they did with the Skyway, with the parking meters. And I don't think we've gotten a conclusive answer if they sold that entire asset, if the private company that would buy it has to honor their rates. I don't think that they do, but nobody has a definitive answer. That's huge. That's huge. It's better to own. I'm the type of person that doesn't lease cars. I prefer to own them because of the untold upcharges at the end. And my greatest concern for Lake Michigan, just getting the route, what the cost is going to be to get the route right away, and that we get ahead of the curve early enough, bringing in partners and lining up those that want to be customers and not partners.
Yeah, and I think as you mentioned, concerns with the, Chicago, that's something we're talking about right now with them, is how to, mitigate some of those risks in a contract. And so that's definitely something that we will present, later this year, is kind of how we attempt to have those risks mitigated in that contract. So, but we'll definitely get an answer to you on the, sale of the system. So, Mayor?
Thank you. Similar to Larry, about tying our fate, again, if you look at this long-term, like a 100-year project to the city of Chicago, and where they're gonna be financially, because there's no guarantees. And for Indiana, I think on the flip side, because I do think we could be a regional provider, but the concern would be that the towns around us trust us enough to go into business with us, much like what I'm saying about us in Chicago.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to recognize, and we'll be looking to, have, the council's support as we start talking to these regional, regional partners, and we encourage you, if you're, talking with them, to, bring it up and, impress upon them, that we're, serious about this, and that we're committed to, having this new water source online by 2030. So, Councilman Coleman?
Again, I don't want to put our citizens at risk with higher rates all the time. Every time you turn around, it could be higher. We have no control at all. And I just don't think that'd be the way to go, because looking down the road, you don't know how the economy is going to be. And just that, oh, well, let's just raise the rates because we need money. Rather than raise our folks' taxes, let's just raise the rates for the regional water. The other thing, my dad always said, never rent, always own. So it's always in my head. And the other thing about the Indiana intake alternative, I'm just concerned about the water at that end, is going to the beach all the time, the Indiana Dunes, a lot of factories around there for years. They dumped all their stuff in there. I'm just concerned that, are we gonna be able to purify that water enough for drinking water?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that question, because at the August workshop, Joe Johnson and his team at Stantec, they're doing a treatment, water treatment process evaluation. And so he can talk a lot then at that meeting about what measures could be put in place to, make sure that the treated water is, to a standard appropriate for our residents. So,
I'm sure it can be done. I just want to make sure it's done right.
yes, understood. Providing safe drinking water is the, number one goal of the program. So, Councilman Turk?
Just looking at two options, I think the Lake Michigan, the Chicago Department of Water Management would be the less expensive short-term solution. But, I would hope that we could mitigate any rate increases and what they would be through a long-term agreement, saying that they're going to be capped at so much a year, and get a long-term agreement to mitigate that. But I think this would be I'm sure you're going to ask these two questions to anybody who potentially would want to be our partner, because I think it would make a big difference to them which they would want to go to.
Yes, that's correct. And as you said, concerns with, Chicago can be mitigated through a long-term contract. And so we're in the process right now of providing feedback to them on their standard terms. There are other, there's a JAWA that exists that has a limit, a cap on rate increases in their contract with Chicago that caps it at no more than 5%, but their contract is only a 15-year contract. So it's, looking at trying to get those terms that would address the concerns of the council. So, okay. And did you have concerns with the Indiana option then?
No, just at the cost of construction of the intake and everything else.
Okay. Councilman Rubin?
Oh, I can agree with what everyone said so far. There's nothing that anyone said that I haven't thought about 1,000 times. I am very concerned about the cost of construction. Of course, I feel there's a lot more what-ifs on the Indiana side. You don't often hear of a project coming in under budget, so I anticipate it being higher than we even anticipate because of the what ifs. And I think we've all been kind of just saying that. The other question that I keep hearing from people is about if we get off the aquifer, what real need for all these other communities is there for them to rush getting off the aquifer into our project?
Yes, and so the State Water Survey, again, which is the scientists to do the groundwater modeling, they actually have run those models, and they're going to be coming out with a report that answers that question. So for each community, so what they found is that when Joliet, leaves the aquifer, there's a slight recovery, but that by 2050, most of the other communities that rely on the aquifer will start to not be able to meet their demands as well. So it's dependent upon each community, but the general overall statement from the State Water Survey is that this aquifer is not sustainable for any community. The amount of water being withdrawn from it far exceeds what is sustainable. So we had a lot of meetings with regional partners, and I don't believe any of them think that their problem is going to be solved by Joliet switching to Lake Michigan water. So, but that is the answer to that question. So,
did you get a feel for how they were, what their concerns or interests or
the regional partners?
Yes.
Yeah, I think a lot of them just it's hard to make a decision when there's so many questions still. What route are you taking? How much is it going to cost? What's the governance going to be? So, a lot of the questions that we're asking here are the same questions that they're asking. So, what we've told them is, we'll present to the council what staff recommends for governance, in August, and look for them to provide feedback on that. And after the decision is made, at the end of this year, then we'll move forward with looking at what rates would be and what the agreements would be. And so I said there is interest. I think people understand that they there's an option to potentially participate in a solution with Joliet, but some of the communities have other options as well. They can, since they don't have as large a demands, they could potentially get water from Illinois American through Homer Glen, or they could partner with the DuPage Water Commission. So really each community has to, look at it and evaluate it for themselves. So again, I think this fall we'll have a better idea, and we can definitely present to the council the information that we're collecting on these one-on-one meetings. So,
Thank
okay.
Chicago, I like the idea that we're purchasing already refined water. They are definitely proven that they know how to treat it, and had, to my knowledge, no problem for a very large area doing it. Cost, though, the rate control is an issue. I don't know that we couldn't get some long-term legislation help on that and staying here, which is also a concern. Then if we go to Indiana on the federal basis, I don't know that any of our federal legislators would be much of any help for us purchasing water out of Indiana. I don't know they wouldn't, but I think that's something that would need to be addressed there. I think that a number of people had already said the cost to go to Indiana, or the unknowns, the cost and the unknowns on there. I've heard your third option that you brought up tonight. I take it with that the negotiations with Chicago are very preliminary on where we're at with that.
Yeah, so we've had meetings with them. Like I said, they've presented, in this RFI response that we received last year, what, rates would be currently. But we're looking to go back and, try and negotiate on the terms and conditions, length of contract, how we could potentially, have a seat at the table, how we could have some input on rate setting. They've been very open about, acknowledging that this is a concern with a lot of their current customers, that they have been, having rate increases, and, there's been a lot of, unhappy customers. So, there's a lot of customers, current customers of City of Chicago, who are looking to find an alternative. I know you guys are familiar with the Southland Group. That is a collection of communities in the South Cook area that is looking to, have a new water source through Indiana. There's also northwest suburbs that are looking to potentially go to Evanston, and then Morton Grove and Niles were two communities that recently just left Chicago. So, I mean, definitely Chicago recognizes that as their customers leave, their rates are going to have to go up even more. So that is definitely, a concern of theirs is to try and keep their customers happy. I think, the current administration, we met with Mayor Odekirk and Mayor Lightfoot, they were very open about the idea that they needed to change their past practices. However, how much we're going to be able to accomplish this year in changing what has been in existence for 100 years, is not known. But we're, again, looking to see, what the best deal we can get that we can present, present this year. The other concern then is, the current administration is very supportive of this, but would future administrations be, but that would be the importance of having a long-term contract.
And going to Indiana, then the lobbyists that we hired a month or two ago, have they brought back any information on any direction or whatever that they have talked to the
Yes,
individuals there?
so I actually today got their first report, which we'll be sharing with you, but it's been identifying the activities that they have been completing. So as you had mentioned, it's very important to have federal and state support to move forward with either project. So that's been a lot of the outreach that's been done, has been educating those those people about the program, as well as trying to digging into more details about the Indiana option, about concerns that there might be, or any potential roadblocks that might be brought up, with going through the Indiana option. I said I don't have the information available. I think it's still, they're progressing on that, but I will send out that report to the council to review.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay, greatest concerns with both alternatives, and I think that our ultimate goal here, everybody in this room agrees that we are looking for sustainability, and we're looking for great quality of water. And we understand there's a cost and there's some risk up there, but I think I'll have to tend to agree with Councilwoman Quillman. Don't rent it, buy it. I think that's, and then our control then is in our hands. And so that would be New Indiana intake for me would be that, and then bringing those partners in. And so, going along with Chicago, it's a lot of unanswered questions there, and a lot of heartburn around some of the things that have already happened, and we don't know how it will affect us. So that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not really big on anything with Chicago. I have a lot of residents have talked to me about that. They don't want to go through Chicago. And my biggest concern with the Indiana intake is what we talked about earlier, acquiring the land. In a perfect world, everybody would cooperate with us. But, does that, when a project like this comes up, is there a lot of people pushing back at us for, trying to go through their land?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely you see this. Why would a neighboring community want their streets tore up to benefit Joliet?
Right.
So, we are looking at, and this is the transmission main routing study that they're currently doing, is looking at corridors potentially, using ComEd right away, so that you wouldn't have to, engage those other communities, or potentially looking to partner with those communities. And then, lastly, if we, looked at some governance structures where you would have then the authority to proceed through those communities, whether they, supported it or not. But I think we are, as Joliet has always demonstrated, looking to be a good partner, and there are benefits to those communities if you, maybe adjust the route. They want, 5th Street paved. Well, we'll put the water main down 5th Street, you get a new street, and it's a win-win for both communities. So I think there's definitely ways to mitigate, that concern. But at the next workshop in August, we'll be having a presentation on that transmission main routing, and they'll go through more detail about, how do you kind of mitigate those concerns. So, okay. Yeah.
Can I ask one more question, Allison?
Yeah.
What's the advantage of, when we're looking for partners, of them jumping on with us now as being a partner, or wait until we're off the aquifer, buying a few more years on their own, and then coming in 20 or 30 years from now?
Yeah, so that's a big decision that we're going to have to make early next year, or in 2022, is how big the infrastructure is going to be. So if a community doesn't jump on right now, then is Joliet going to subsidize oversizing the infrastructure to support future partners? And that's a pretty big decision to make, because it would be paid for by Joliet. So we're really impressing upon the communities that, the likelihood that we would oversize everything for their future involvement is unlikely, and so that's really the reason that they need to take this seriously now and consider switching with Joliet on the schedule that we have. So
Thank you.
Councilman Morris is here.
oh I didn't, I'm sorry, Councilman Morris, would you like to provide your input on these questions?
I was listening and I kind of agree with what I've been hearing. I'm sorry. You all weren't there. Yeah, it's basically, what you've been said, I guess from the day one, control, sustainability. Between the two, it's just a toss-up.
Well, and we understand, we're not asking you to make a decision today because we have a lot of information to provide, but just if you had to think of a concern for either of them, is there one that, a specific concern?
It's basically the same, Chicago, pricing, Indiana, the route.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
I had a couple of
Go ahead.
clarifications.
Yep.
In response to Councilman Turk, and of course your opinion would matter on this, but it's something I've been pushing, trying to push all along. Mike, what would encourage him is, if you're brought in as a partner, you're guaranteed kind of an operations and cost basis rate for the entirety, or the commission as we may describe it. If you want to wait till you're a customer, we're going to be looking for, the commission is going to be looking for profit. Whether it's 10 or 12 or 15% profit, you make that risk. Getting on the ground level and sharing a proportionate load, like you said, we're 30 million. So if we go with the 60 million a day, we're 50% of it. Somebody else might be 13%, somebody else might be 8%, and they can carry that bond load, and then they're locking in their rates that would mirror our rates. No profit to be made. If they want to wait and be customers, that would be a little bit less. And one other thing that Councilman Turk had said earlier, so I want to get clarification. With the Chicago option, we don't have the option to resell, do we?
No, we do.
And for what volume?
Chicago,
Did they give us 60 or 90 million?
Yeah, any of the scenarios they said that they could support.
Okay. And then the other thing is there any access to this meeting publicly?
Yes, it's televised and it's being streamed
All right,
live.
it's being, because I didn't see the screens changing. Do the potential partners you discussed with, were they notified to go ahead and try to watch it? Those people?
Yes, so again, we sent this out as an e-blast to all of our stakeholders, and all of those partners are on the stakeholder list.
Okay, and we talked about, I think Councilwoman Reardon had brought up, and it is true in public projects that they go up, but you guys didn't put in a plus or minus. You didn't put in a margin error. You put in a 30%, if I remember, contingency on top of what you already described as a very conservative estimate to begin with.
Yeah, and I'm going to have Joe come in and talk about cost, because one of the cost is very important, and the level when you do these following engineering protocols, was a class 5 cost estimate. So there is a significant contingency with a plus or minus. And then this year, we're gonna be reducing that amount of contingency down because we do feel like it's more refined, so it'll be a class 4 cost estimate. So we'll have more confidence in those numbers when they're presented this year. Okay. Well, with that, I know Joe had said he was gonna come back and speak about the results of the PESTLE analysis, so you can see what kind of the risks that were identified during that. And Joe, if you could also put you on the spot to kind of talk about funding and cost estimating.
So no, excellent question on the cost. And as Allison laid out very clearly, if you think about estimating the cost at this point, we don't have final routes defined, we don't have final agreements. And so there is a range, there's a lot of uncertainty around the cost. And so we build a contingency in to cover both uncertainty as well as things that we haven't designed yet, right? Somebody can come in and say, build me a 3-bedroom house. That could be a relatively inexpensive 3-bedroom house, or it could be a very expensive 3-bedroom house. We need to define that through this course of what do these facilities look like, what does the treatment plant look like, so that we can then narrow that contingency down. Because you're exactly right, if you think about it, on a $1 billion project, a 30% contingency is $300 million. That's a lot of money to have kind of lumped on at the end. So our goal with engineering, because as was pointed out, the history with projects is people get very aggressive early on, and then the costs tend to go up. Our goal is more of an opportunity where we start with a fairly wide range, and over time we want to narrow that range down, but we want to stay within that range. And then as Allison talked about, the other part of this that is very important, there are the capital costs that we pay for construction. There are the costs that we pay for operating and maintenance and buying the water. There are also financing costs. And so how we approach financing this project can have a significant impact. Joliet obviously doesn't have cash on hand to pay this all at once, so it's going to have to be financed over time. And a credit to the city is that with some forethought last year, efforts have been taken to position the city for a couple of very attractive sources of low interest loans. Now granted, this is not grant money, this does have to be paid back, but there are two particular programs that Joliet has been pursuing. The WIFIA program, which is a federal program. WIFIA stands for Water Infrastructure Financing and Innovation Act. And this is a federal program that's administered by the US EPA that's specifically tailored to large projects. And the structure is that if you are accepted into the program, they will finance up to 49% of the project at attractive interest rates. One of the other benefits is they will typically allow you to defer your initial repayment period until 5 years after the project is started. So you can imagine in a project of this magnitude where we have several years of construction, if you can start drawing on that money early and not having to start paying it back for a while, that again helps in terms of financing. Joliet submitted a letter of interest last year for the WIFIA program and was selected to submit an application. So one of the goals of this program at the end of 2021, once an alternative has been selected, will be to submit that formal application to US EPA to apply for that loan funding for a significant part of the project. Excuse me. So the WIFIA grant, Joliet is well positioned for that. The other program is a state program where the state EPA manages a revolving fund. So communities are provided with low interest loans. As communities that took those loans out 15 years ago pay them back, that money goes back into the pot and supports new programs. Illinois EPA has estimated that they will have on the order of $250 million a year available for funding across the state for these projects in the water sector. And they've indicated that they have the ability to allocate as much as 20% of that to a single project. Now, it's a competitive process. They can't guarantee that. But they are also interested in multi-year projects. Sorry. And so there's a great opportunity there where Joliet should be able to position again for a long-term program to secure low-interest money through the state. Those two things can help significantly reduce the interest costs. The financing strategy, the models that were built last year, assumed that 49% of the program would be funded through WIFIA, that another 250 million, up to 250 million, so 50 million a year for 5 years could be funded through the revolving loan program. And then the balance would have to be funded through bonds that would come in at a slightly higher interest rate. But that'll be something we continue to watch again through this process so that we make sure we can manage what those financing costs are.
Joe, on the WIFIA, it's a limited program, right? They're limited funds, so
Yes.
that's why they select who can apply and then they weigh the applications, correct? For the
They-
WIFIA loans?
Yes, generally their approach has been that the letter of interest is really the critical gateway. Once your letter of interest has been accepted, you're basically on their list to submit an application. So you can't just submit an application out of the blue. You have to go through the process of being pre-approved, if you will, to submit your application. Then the application is really the loan development process. But the history has been that once you're approved to submit that application, you're in line to get money. You still have to go through the process and do it. You have to justify it. And certainly, depending on the magnitude of this project, that may affect how much is available.
Would a regional proposal be more attractive to them as they judge who gets in front of the line?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I think right now they are aware that Joliet is looking at this as either a Joliet only or a regional project. And I think in general, my sense is that they would look to see that you're looking for a cost-effective project. And so if there are economies of scale from a regional standpoint, I would think that that would be a positive. But I don't think that's a deal breaker right now.
Thank you.
Joe,
Yes,
so are
Tom.
these monies available to us whether we went to Chicago or Indiana?
That is correct. I mean, right now, and again, there's a process to
Right.
apply and secure these, but the letter of interest that Allison put together last year indicated that the city was still in the process of making this decision. And quite honestly, this is based on Stantec's experience with WIFIA. This is a little bit unusual that they would accept a project that is still in the very early stages of development. But there seemed to be a real interest in getting a WIFIA project approved in Illinois, and the timing was right. So US EPA understands that final decision has not been made. And they're expecting us to update our letter of interest this year as we get more information there.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the financing part of this?
Yeah, one more, Joe.
Yes, sir.
When you say low interest, can you give us a window, how you would illustrate that?
What we used in the calculations last year for the WIFIA loan was 3% per year for, I want to say 30 years with that 5-year deferral. The Illinois EPA revolving loan fund, we assume 2.5% for 30 years. And I think for the bond estimates right now, we're using 4% over 20 years, so it's a shorter payback period. But we'll be monitoring those to see how those change. Obviously, you know, the way the economy moves around, there have been circumstances in past years where, quite honestly, communities could go out and issue bonds and get comparable rates to some of these low-interest programs. But I think right now, and certainly over a long period, looking out 20 or 30 years, you know, there should be attractive rates there.
Do they, kind of fleeting moment there on my question. Oh, are they both limited to 30 years, or can they be extended to 35 or 40 years?
I believe right now they're both limited to 30. But we'll get some more information on those programs. And again, I think as Allison mentioned, we have another presentation to the Finance Committee in August, and that will be one of the topics we'll be doing then, is going through kind of an update on what we've learned as we've gotten more information about the project and talked to the funding agencies about what those terms would look like.
Thank you.
So the last thing that I wanted to do today, and I want to make sure Teresa has time to kind of talk about the documents we want to present at the end of the year, but I did want to share with you at least some high-level results from this PESTLE analysis we talked about. And as we indicated, Councilman Hugg and Councilwoman Reardon were there, along with 10 other staff from the city and members of the consultant team. Went through a fairly large process, and you know, listening to the risks and concerns that you expressed, there is a lot of similarity, and there are consistent themes. Obviously, one of the themes that came out of this, and the way to read this chart, if you will, there were 18 people that completed the analysis. So that axis along the bottom goes from about 0 to 15. This chart shows how many times was this particular risk ranked in the top 10? So how many times did somebody in the group put it in their top 10? So that first one kind of said that, this is a long-term project. Maintaining political support, whether that's internal to Joliet or whether it's external in terms of our partners and our regional partners, that's going to be a challenge. Quite honestly, designing a pipeline, engineers can do that. We know how to design a pipe and get it from point A to point B and move water. Some of these non-technical concerns are challenges that will take the energy of this council and the team and our partners to kind of maintain that support. There was a lot of talk, I think, from concern about a lack of cooperation from our water source partners. If we can't quickly get a sense of what the terms would be with Chicago or with an access provider in Indiana, that's a huge factor that could delay our decision and delay the overall program. Costs show up here several places. I won't go through each of these, but the third and fourth items both relate to costs and how they could potentially impact the city finances. Obviously, if the costs go up unexpectedly, that money has to come from somewhere else. Does that require the city to move funds that were planned for something else to fund this project? Obviously, that's a risk we want to avoid. There was discussion about does the high cost of the project, does that cause us to lose public support, and does that delay our ability to move the project forward? And that's really, right, the biggest risk here overall is that we are not able to move the project forward in time and that Joliet starts to encounter shortages of water. And so that's really our goal here, as was mentioned before, time is a critical factor here that needs to be at the front of our view. But the other items, a lot of the other items that you mentioned, delayed decisions by the regional partners, technical challenges, external opposition. We're going to have to interact with a lot of parties regardless of which option is there. That's a big concern. So I applaud you. I think you all covered a lot of the same issues that came up in that PESTLE analysis. So I think we're on the same page. I don't think I really heard anything tonight that hasn't been discussed, so I'm not too worried about new surprises. But I would encourage you as we go forward, if you have concerns about the project or if something pops into your head and say, how are we dealing with that? Please contact Allison. She'll get in touch with the team, and we want to continually evaluate this and make sure that we're on top of the things that can delay us or cause issues as we work through the program. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Teresa to talk a little bit about the format of the documents we are planning to give you at the end of the year to provide information to allow you to make the decision. And again, we don't have all the blanks filled in now, but we want to make sure that the type of information we're providing is what will be useful to you. So, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Teresa O'Grady. I'm with Crawford, Murphy & Tilley, and I'm part of the consultant team for the Alternative Water Source Program. And as Joe mentioned, I'm going to be talking about the prospectus outline. So one of the things that should have been on your desk when you got here is the outline. It is a working draft of the outline, and I'm going to be going through it in detail through this presentation. But I just want to kind of take a step back and how we decided to provide this prospectus to you guys in November to help make this decision. As Allison had mentioned, we're going to be asking you guys to decide on the alternative water source at the end of the year in December. So we need to give you guys the information that you need to make this a very important decision, because we know it's not an easy decision. So when the consultant team started talking about the 2020 evaluation, and we were looking at what information we could provide, we came up with this idea of the prospectus. And when I think of a prospectus, I'm thinking of a document that a new business venture would put together and provide to potential investors to get them to invest in their company. And so similarly with the Alternative Water Source Program, we envision that this would be a document, a brief document, that would provide the business case for a given water source alternative. And that is what we envision here. So it's going to highlight the business case for each alternative water source alternative. And we envision that there's going to be a document for each water source alternative. So you'll have one for the Lake Michigan, Chicago Department of Water Management alternative, and one for the new Indiana intake alternative. And those will be able to give you a side-by-side comparison of the two different water source alternatives. And so I want to take a little bit of time to go into those, what's going to be included in those, because as Joe had mentioned through his discussion, there's a lot of uncertainties at this point, and really uncertainties that will still exist at the end of 2020 when we're asking you guys to make this decision. You guys talked about challenges with making the decision and some of the concerns you have. So our hope through this discussion is to talk about what we plan to include in this prospectus document and determine if there's anything that you guys say, this is missing, we want to include that. And so after I do my presentation, Allison will come back and we'll go through what other information you guys think you will need in order to make the decision on the alternative water source. So first, let's look at an overview of the prospectus. And we're going to go through each of these in detail, and we're showing them on the screen right now. But one of the things I wanted to draw attention to you is that they're different colors there. So as we look at the executive summary and we look at the alternative evaluation, the alternative analysis, and prospectus highlights that are all in green, in that document, that would be specific to that alternative. Looking at then the items in blue, the problem statement, the water sources available in northeastern Illinois, the previous studies, and the methodology, those would all be parts of the document that would be the same for each prospectus. So I do want to go through those in more detail and describe what the goal of each section will be and what will be included in each section. So we start out, there will be an executive summary. It will have a concise summary of the prospectus and everything that's then following in the prospectus. We'll have a problem statement. This is common in a lot of prospectus documents that tells why we need this new water source alternative. Identifying the need due to the depletion of the existing water source. So we'll talk about the summary of the existing system and the reliance on the deep well aquifer system. We'll talk about historical and projected water demands, really where the city is looking at being in 2050 and beyond as far as water demands and how this new alternative water source would need to be sized. We're going to look at the historical water levels and groundwater modeling projections that, as Allison had indicated, the State Water Survey has done, and look at that time frame for depletion of the aquifer and make that case for why there needs to be a new alternative water source. And again, that problem statement section would be the same for both prospectus documents because it's the same regardless of which alternative you're looking at. The third section would be talking about available water sources in northeastern Illinois, going into detail about what water source other communities use, whether it's local to Joliet or just throughout northeastern Illinois. The fourth section would be to talk about previous studies, really highlight the past and recent alternative water source evaluations that Joliet has completed. And it's a long history. Allison has talked about this in previous presentations. There's been historic evaluations of water sources by Joliet, and then most recently in the past 18 months, the phase 1 and phase 2 alternative water source studies. The fifth section is going to talk about the methodology associated with the evaluation being completed in 2020. And so The goal of this section is to describe the steps that the project team is taking right now to develop that alternative and evaluate those two alternatives. And so there's several things we're going through, and they're listed up there, but it's really in an effort to fine tune that alternative and make sure we have those cost estimates at a higher level than what we had in the phase 2 evaluation. So there's engineering and siting and routing studies that are going to be done in 2020. We're meeting with those water purchase and water access suppliers and negotiating those terms and conditions. Putting together the Class 4 opinions of probable construction cost, looking into further that funding strategy and the impact on water rates and total cost of water, the regional outreach that we are doing, and the evaluation of governance that could be used to incorporate those regional partners. We are looking at the permitting plans associated with each alternative and how that affects then the overall implementation plan. Going through this risk analysis, as Joe talked about, with the risk register, and then speaking to the governmental advocacy and outreach that's being done. And again, this is the methodology, this is the process we are taking in 2020. So in both of those prospectus documents, it would be the same. We're going through that same methodology, we're going through those same steps for each of the two alternatives. And now we start to get into the portion of the prospectus document that is specific to each alternative. So these sections in the two prospectus documents would be different. And the goal of this section is to summarize the results of the 2020 evaluation for the water source alternative. And so a lot of this is gonna maybe have a similar look and feel to what was in the phase 2 evaluation. So under description of alternative, we're going to talk about where we're getting the water source. If there's water treatment involved, we'll talk about what that water treatment is and highlight the finished water quality goals. Also talk about water delivery infrastructure, and what we're talking about there is the transmission main, the storage, the pumping stations to get it from its water source to Joliet. We're also going to talk about the water purchase and water access agreement terms. We're going to talk about the agreement structure and terms, the rights and responsibilities of the parties. We'll talk about the basis of costs and fees and provisions for modification and or dispute resolution. And again, this is all stuff we are working through right now with these different water supplier for purchase and access. We'll also highlight the cost of the water. We will highlight those water purchase and water access costs. We'll highlight those capital costs, those Class 4 cost estimates. We'll look at operation, maintenance, and replacement costs, the funding strategy, the impact on monthly water rates, and the total cost of water. The next section in here is regional implication. Through the regional outreach, we are asking communities if it makes a difference which alternative the city goes to. And we want to provide that information to you guys so that you know whether a community is in or out versus depending on the alternative that's being presented. We'll talk about the permitting plan that's being developed, and if there's certain permits that take longer or more of them for a given alternative, and how that impacts the implementation plan. And that goes into that implementation plan and schedule, looking at design and construction, looking at the water source transfer plan, which is that transition from the existing source to the new source to ensure that there's no impact to customers. There's operations and staffing evaluations that will also be done and talked about in these prospectus so that you guys know whether or not a greater level of staff is required for a given alternative versus another one. And then we're gonna go through an alternative analysis. There's things that we can identify specifically, such as costs, lengths of water main, specific numbers, but there's also things we can't identify, and this is where the uncertainty and the risk is. So in this alternative analysis, we're gonna discuss the business case associated with the water source alternative, and we're gonna highlight the risk and impact to the strategic plan. So it's a SWOT analysis. If you guys have worked with that before, identifying the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats associated with each alternative, and trying to identify those in not only just an idea, but put cost to those. If we think a certain alternative could have a greater cost impact, we'll try to quantify that. And then lastly, we're going to do a prospectus highlights, and we're going to highlight the benefits of selecting that water source alternative and really provide that full business case for each alternative that then you guys can use as a side-by-side comparison. And so with that, I guess if you have any questions about what we've included right now, the next step will be to talk about if there's anything missing. But do you have any questions about what I've presented? Okay, I'll bring Allison back in then to have the next group discussion.
Great, thank you, Teresa. So basically, Teresa just told you what we're going to tell you in November. The worst case for us is it comes to be November and you say, well, what about this? And we don't, haven't looked into it and don't have an answer to your question. So our goal is to, think of all the things that possibly could be needed to make the decision and present that, to you in these prospectus documents in November. So that's where we've come to this last question, again, that we want to discuss is, does that outline that Teresa went through present all the information topics that you would need to, make the decision? We talked about we're going to provide updated cost information. We're going to provide the risk analysis. We're going to provide the outreach that we've done to the potential regional partners. We're going to identify those potential political roadblocks through the advocacy that we're doing currently, and provide you with that description of the terms and conditions that would be part of each option. So I guess I'll just start with Councilman Turk, if you would provide your thoughts on if what we present tonight covers all those topics.
I think it did. It was pretty informative, and looking forward to the next one.
Okay, great.
I like the prospectus. I just wonder, what is the time frame from the time that we will be given it so that we can review it, not just, and
Yes.
then before we make this discussion and decision.
So similar to last year, what we're proposing is that we would present the prospectus documents, I think the date's like November 10th. It would be the second Tuesday in November. And then, depending on the amount of questions and feedback we had, then, look to have the decision made by the end of the year. But of course, we would, like, your input. I know it's a very big decision. I know even myself, I have no conclusion at this point about what option, I would recommend. So I'm, struggling with that myself and really looking at what information we're going to gather in the next 4 months to present that. So does that schedule seem reasonable?
Yeah, I'd just like to have a chance to review it before I sit down to start discussing it, because
Okay.
it takes a while to review between the two. And
Yes, and we'll look at that. Like I said, the documents are going to be brief. We're not, the basis of design is probably going to be hundreds of pages, but we're really looking at these basis of design being, more in the 25 to 30 page range. So it sounds like you would like to see that before the presentation then in
Yes.
November?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
So Elson, you said our next meeting's in August.
Yes, correct.
There would be nothing with the prospectus in August?
That's correct.
What will you be presenting in August then?
So in August, what we are planning to discuss is we want to talk about, it's going to be more educational about some of the technical information about water treatment processes. As Joe was mentioning, there's differences in, options for water treatment, and that will then, weigh into what those costs would be. So we want to get feedback from the council on water treatment processes. We're also going to be talking a lot about governance for a potential regional system. A lot of our regional partners are asking, well, what's the terms? They want to know the same information that we do. So we're evaluating that right now at a staff level, and we'll look to present then what potential governance structure to the council in August. And then speaking to a lot of the concerns about the transmission main routing, right now we're going through an evaluation to identify what the recommended transmission main route will be for both options, and we'll present that to the council in August.
So I think like Sherry, I'd like to prospectus as early as possible because every statement begs another question.
Yes. Yeah, so we will look at, of course, we're going to use up every amount of those 4 months with all the information that we're collecting. So I think we could probably, provide that, the week prior to that workshop. But of course, we, after that presentation, there's going to be time. We're going to have the public forum to get that public input as well, which I know you'll want to, consider in your decision. And we can have subsequent meeting, after that too, to follow up with questions. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I don't see anything additional from what I can think of for the perspective. But as they were saying about getting it early, so we're not going to make a decision in November.
That's correct.
Okay.
The November workshop would just be presenting the evaluation. So that would be, presenting it to the public. So.
But getting it early, we can have questions.
Yeah, if you would like to read it ahead of time, that would be, I know sometimes it's hard to read something, you'd rather have it presented and then be able to digest it, but we can accommodate that so that you can, see it, so you can have questions available for the meeting.
Same here. I think that the perspective outline is very good. Well, all of us don't know what we don't know, but I'm sure that this outline and especially with the executive summary as we begin to compare these two alternatives. And so as we go through it, I agree with my colleagues that time to get it to us so we could read it, digest it, and then possibly formulate some other questions that we may have. But from what I see here and what she just went through,
Okay.
I think it's a good outline.
Yeah, and another thing we were talking about too is, if putting it in some, like a comparison in some type of one page, where you'd see the items side by side too, might be helpful. So we'll explore that further as well. So that would be a real, quick summary. Of course, some of it would be subjective based on, the team's evaluation, but we can look at that option as well.
Yeah, I think the prospectus is complete. I just look forward to this whole process and seeing how this goes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think the prospectus is pretty thorough for what I believe I'm going to need to make my final decision. Just one detailed question right now. You had used it as an example or mentioned it a couple times, the root analysis. Mm-hmm. We are investigating I-80 and
That's
FDOT and IDOT and using that access, which could ultimately be free.
Yes, that's correct. So we, the project team, actually just this past month, they have reached out to Tollway, to IDOT, to Forest Preserve, to the county highway, to the utility companies. And so all of those options are being evaluated, and then they're going to kind of present four options that we'll look at a staff level and then make that recommendation to council, in August. identifying the route that is best. But definitely talking with IDOT is something that is taking place currently.
Well, like I said, the prospectus to me seems like it would be thorough enough for me to make a decision.
Okay,
I'm fine.
you're fine.
Bring on the homework.
Yeah, and just generally, like I said, we've laid out these workshops. If at any time you need more information, I am always willing to, meet with each of you. Like I said, really the newsletter that we're sending out on a monthly basis is that more detailed update about what we're doing. And if I'd be open if you feel, I know everyone's time is very valuable and our meetings are already, a lot going on. But if like I said, we don't want to get to November and then wish we had spent more time or provided more information or done more outreach. So if you feel that you need more information, we're more than happy to do more workshops, more presentations at council, however you would be comfortable, because we understand what a significant decision this is and the timing associated with it. So we just want to make sure that we're providing the right amount of information. So.
Just one question, Allison. You mentioned when you started here that there's approximately 1,000 stakeholders.
Yes.
Your definition of a stakeholder?
So when we started the phase 1 study, we put together a list of stakeholders, and it included neighborhood associations, environmental groups, churches, the neighborhood councils, potential regional partners. And so since then, it's really opened up just to the public, and anyone can sign up at the website. They just have to put their email address in and click send, and then they get added to the stakeholder list. We also have, our large customers, large water users, businesses. So that stakeholder is a very broad term, but that is, and if you know of anyone who should be more involved, we have these stakeholder meetings. We had our first stakeholder meeting in May. We're doing those using Zoom. We had over 60 people participate, which was good turnout. More turnout than we thought we probably have if we had it in person. So, but we're trying to expand that, of course. So that is, we have the next stakeholder meeting scheduled for July 30th.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. If there's any further questions? Okay, thank you for your time. Happy that we got done 15 minutes early, so I know there's more items on the agenda tonight, so.
Thank you, Allison.
So next on the agenda is citizens to be heard on agenda items. We received no emails for this section this evening, nor did we have anyone sign up to be called to speak. The next item on the agenda is under resolutions. It's Council Memo 350-20, resolutions associated with the Hobart Road Bridge extension. It is being recommended this item be tabled to the July 7th, 2020 council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Been motioned and seconded to table Council Memo 350-20 to the July 7th, 2020 council meeting. Councilman Dickinson.
Aye.
Councilwoman Gavin.
Aye.
Councilman Hug.
Aye.
Councilman Morris.
Aye.
Councilman Mudrin.
Aye.
Councilwoman Quillman.
Aye.
Councilwoman Reardon.
Aye.
Councilman Turk.
Aye.
Motion carried. Council Memo 350-20 was tabled to the July 7th, 2020 council meeting. Next, moving on under award of contracts is Council Memo 352-20, authorization to approve a contract with Slavin Management Consultants for an executive search for city manager for the city of Joliet.
So moved.
Second.
Before we vote, Krista, again, I said this privately and I said it last week, I'll say it again publicly. I don't know why we're doing this again. We've done this once. We narrowed the field to 2 finalists. I thought there were several other candidates I thought were qualified that I would have hired, but we did the personality test. We get through all this, and then it all was for nothing. Tens of hours of staff time, thousands of dollars, We put these candidates through the ringer. Both of them were traveling from out of state. I have no idea why we're doing this again. There's local qualified people. I believe that there's someone out there that we're not, to be frank, I don't think we're being told the whole truth. I wish we just go ahead, hire this person so we can move the city forward. It's been a year of this. We've been stuck in neutral. Nothing positive is coming to this, and we're talking probably about 6 or 8 more months of the current situation if we move forward this way. And at the end of the day, if you go to a nationwide search, I've done 3 of them now, ultimately you're gonna be guessing on somebody probably from out of state. You're in a room with them, with a group for 3 or 4 hours, and you have to make the determination. I don't know how you could come to a better conclusion. You might get lucky, but how you come to a better conclusion versus somebody local that's qualified that you know and you've known for some time now, has been evaluated in the community, you think you could do the job. So I would urge the council not to redo this search, this process all over again. I think it was a waste the first time. I think it'd be a bigger mistake a second time, and just move forward with whoever is out there, and let's get the city back into gear.
Mayor, how would we be bringing these people up? And at the July 7th meeting in closed session, that anybody that has a candidate that they would like to have interviewed, or what are your thoughts?
We can do it tonight in closed session. I'm springing this maybe on some people. They may need time to think about it, but yeah, I can wait till July 7th if you want to do it then.
I have nobody. I'm willing to talk to some people whose name that we talked about at the last meeting have surfaced. I have not mentioned it to them to see if they have any interest.
What about the job description?
Well, I thought the 5 want to change the description, I thought. I'm trying not to use the derogatory term, but I thought it was on the table that the 5 people who rejected the 2 finalists want to change the job description.
I thought the job description change was a simple "or," meaning that people who had been a part of, not been a city manager, maybe a deputy city manager for a certain amount of time was the only change. I don't remember any other major changes to it.
Mayor,
Yes.
if I remember correctly, Councilwoman, you're correct. What the only change I'm aware of so far as proposed is clarifying that a deputy city manager will be included as a department head. That's essentially what you just, I think, described. But I was under the impression there was more changes.
I didn't know that was a consensus. I thought,
Mayor,
yes.
That was pretty much.
land use is meeting on Thursday at 4 o'clock to finalize the city manager position, and it's to go to council on the 7th, I believe.
Are you considering any other changes in the "or"?
I'm not, we didn't lower any standard. The only change was, as Councilwoman Reardon said, is the "or," to consider deputy city managers in a city comparable in so many years. And right now, the city attorney is rewriting it to with the, that's the only change. Everything is the same except for that. Because it kind of was confusing. It did say that a deputy city manager is a department head, but that wasn't really considered because it wasn't specific. So department, the third word, deputy city managers, that applied. But when we talked to Kathy that night, Ms. Franson, she said in the end, they really weren't qualified and made the requirements. And the requirements, excuse me, it's dry. The requirements, we were gonna go over on Thursday to make sure that it's, all the same. That was the only change, was the deputy chief, or deputy city manager, excuse me.
Well, and not to be argumentative, but if that's the only change, what makes anyone think you're gonna get a better or a different crop of candidates than what we just went through a couple months ago?
Question on the heels of that question, Mayor, for Kathy.
Okay.
Kathy, have you reached out to Slavin and asked him, I don't know if anybody recalls, back when you were considering doing a search after firing Marty last summer, at the time, GovHR was pretty direct and honest, saying you should not do anything for at least 6 months, if not more, because Joe has poison. I think it's the word they use, poison or tainted. Have you asked them what their consideration is? Are they aware of what's going on for a year and where we're at right now, and what obstacles may be there, and what is their opinion as direct as GovHR was?
So I did speak with Robert Slavin. He's obviously the owner of the consulting firm that we're considering. He acknowledges that there will be challenges to the search, but he remains confident that he is going to be able to source a person that will be qualified for consideration for the position.
And would it be possible in the agreement, as we've already spent the money on this one time, and as the mayor had pointed out, the majority of this council didn't pull the trigger. They did it there, but they didn't out here. Could we have it in the contract that if they don't supply more than the 25 we got when you did it, and you did a good job, that there's some kind of discount involved then? Because they really haven't expanded our, if we only get another 25 again, a similar, group of people, that makes me concerned.
I don't know that they will guarantee a number. They state that they will provide qualified candidates for consideration, but they do also provide a type of, for lack of a better term, guarantee to the person as well.
So
They stand behind their candidates that they provide for consideration.
regardless of how many then, whether it's 25 or more or less, right? If this council doesn't have 5 people that are willing to pull the trigger, what happens with that guarantee that they'll provide somebody that we can settle on? What does that guarantee entail?
Well, the guarantee will be that the candidates qualify for the position based on the requirements that we provide to Slavin.
Same thing process that you had gone through?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome.
Mayor?
Yes.
Kathy, you were gonna check, I believe, on the pricing, if that stayed the same?
It did actually.
Okay.
There's some incidentals that aren't included in their final price that we would decide whether or not we wanted to afford. So that would be to the candidates if there's any out-of-state travel. But Slavin's total price, their total price came in at $23,901, $23,901.
Mayor, can I get a clarification on these, the or the including a deputy or assistant city manager, deputy city manager as an department head? I believe it's 6 months minimum of actual city manager experience, correct?
Hold on, I have it here.
Okay, I just want to know where we're headed there,
I figured this would come up.
to be clear and transparent. And whatever as you look for that, Councilwoman, and I appreciate it, whatever the requirements are to qualify a department head would then apply to a deputy. In other words, I believe that the department heads have to have more experience than just 6 months. So then the deputy city manager would need that additional experience too.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that our ordinance isn't going to be downgraded.
No, it's not going to be downgraded. We're going to pass this, discuss it again on Thursday, as I said. And what's stated now, there was a question about the residency. So it does say already, must reside or dwell permanently or continuously, keep a return or particular dwelling place as a fixed, settled, or legal abode in the city of Joliet corporate limits within 9 months from the date of hire. Now, there was some question about that before, but whoever takes this job has to live in the city and cannot commute from another home back and forth. So that's how it was worded in here. And the other education experience, bachelor's or business degree, governmental administration, civil engineering, municipal planning. Here, let me take this down. Political science or a related field, master's degree preferred. Minimum of 8 years of progressively responsible municipal government administrative management experience, preferably at the department head level or higher. And that's where that comes in, or deputy city manager, okay? And then minimum of 6 months of previous city manager experience, or any equivalent military experience and training which provides the required knowledge, skill, and ability. So it's department head level or higher. So higher could have meant deputy city manager, but because it wasn't worded that way, it wasn't regarded as such. And that's,
Because I guess my question then is,
Yeah.
and you clarified it, but so it just led to one more question here. Under the proposal that you guys will discuss at committee next week or this week,
Thursday,
for Thursday?
4 o'clock.
Now, if someone has 6 months of city manager experience, but only 7 years total in government, do they qualify instead of the 8 years?
No, but I'm sure that's something we could look at as a whole, council as a whole, if it's the right person.
You know what I mean? So somebody who's got no city manager experience has got 8 years in, say, as public works, right? From Monaco somewhere.
Not 8 years of city manager experience,
No, 8 years of progressive experience.
of progressively responsible municipal government at the administrative management experience. Here, do you want to read it?
No, I heard what you said. What I'm trying
At the
to,
department head level or higher.
right. So why do we have the 6 month in there if they're all required to have 8 years of progressively?
Because if they're already a city manager, you don't know how long they've been a city manager, and it just says 6 months of previous city manager experience. But Chris is writing this up, that's why we have to go over it again.
You see what my
look at the
question
wording.
is? My
I
question
understand what
is,
you're saying, yes.
does a city manager who was
Gotcha.
a golden boy in some large city and worked 7 years and in his 6th year, he became city manager and he put in a year, he doesn't qualify under that, or he does, versus somebody who's the head of a department for 8 years?
Well, he would, because he probably had experience in another town before he came to the city manager position in the other town.
He or she.
He or she, sorry. Did I say that? Do you got me? He could have been a department head at another city, and then went to another city and became the city manager for 7.5 years, like you're suggesting. So he's already has the,
No, I
he or
didn't
she
mean that.
already has the
Pam.
experience.
I didn't mean that. I meant,
Okay.
what if he started with that city and he was a golden person, boy, man or woman, and he put in 7 years before he actually was made their city manager. He doesn't have the 8 years in. He's got 6 months of city manager because he or she just really, took off. Now, again, you might say, what's the odds of something like that? I don't care what the odds are. What's the odds that you'd have 5 people saying yes in there and no out there? And I don't want to see us spend more money if we don't have all our that's why I'm bringing it up now before your committee meeting on Thursday. Is it a, and I guess we're back to and/or again, for a city manager person, man or woman, who's got 6 months minimum, a city manager, do they have to have a cumulative 8 years, or could they have 7.5 years because they have that 6 months and still qualify? Do you see what my question is?
I don't have the answer for you, okay? I don't have the answer for you.
So
If
you have
anybody
Chris-
wants to come to the meeting and read the job description, this was the tentative one that we talked about. And there's the and/or in there that Mr. Regis or Ms. Spano is going to put in the description. And, as a council, I'm thinking anything could be, if you're getting that tight, if the person has that much experience, I don't think 6 months or a year is going to matter that much if the person's that qualified. But that's just me talking. I'm not speaking for anybody else.
I agree.
Thank you. So definitely has to live here, though. That was the big contender, though, before, that the concern that a person was not going to live here, going to commute. So if you want to come to the meeting on Thursday, I'm sure Terry would love to have you, right, Terry?
I sure would.
No, I have,
And just go over it. Before it comes to council, we vet it at council, I would like to just vet it, bring it to the council on the 7th, and then everybody look at it, and we can always tweak it again at the council if you don't like it.
and then the other question I have is, quite frankly, I can say for my own, outside of that minor tweak, including the deputy city manager as a department head, but changing nothing else, if anything else has changed, if it's downgraded, in my opinion, I will not support any candidate, no matter what a new one, and I'm not saying you 3 will do it. I'm saying it can be done. I won't vote for anybody that has less experience than we already have currently in our ordinance. With that said, is there anybody here that requires 9 votes to pull the trigger? Because that's apparently part of the explanation I got from one of the 5-vote majority when I asked, I think, Pat, it was you, at the last meeting, and you said, well, it was such an important decision to be made that you really wanted a consensus of 9.
That you could work with the person, yes.
Well, you're going to have to work with them, even if only 5 vote for them, or 6 or 7.
But are you willing to work with them?
Oh, you're going to have to work with anybody but is it my question personally, as a member of the council, are you going to require in your mind that there be 9 votes of yes out here, even if 1 or 2 are not in favor of them, out here for the contract?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Well, let's have a double standard because you weren't willing to work with Marty Shanahan.
Correct.
Okay.
So if.
So what
if you're
applies
not-
for you, what's good for you is good for anyone else. You
Sure.
can't,
If
you
you're-
can't have
if-
it both
if-
ways.
If some of the group won't work with this person, I don't think I can go for it.
Okay,
If everybody's willing to work with them, it doesn't have to be my first choice.
I didn't know that was the standard. All 9 people have to agree, but
I didn't make it that.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
I just wanna go back, just because when we was at the land use meeting, I was kinda taken back too. I thought it was gonna be more changes.
Right.
Because we didn't need to meet just to put or and Mr. Jones is the one that kinda gave us the format of why we were there, to add the deputy city manager. But we kinda came to the conclusion of putting or in there. I don't know, I just like it. But I thought too, and I don't know how, how I got that, but I thought it was other changes, not saying it was downgrading it or whatever, but I thought it was more to it and I don't wanna say to fit a particular person, but I just thought we were doing more changes than adding the word or.
I did too. I thought there was more
When I
being
came to that
discussed.
meeting, and I think I kind of expressed it in so many words that I thought, but I was waiting on, Mr. Jones, and he did tell us really what the changes needed to be based on, I guess, council people, communication, which was fine. So I just wanted to make that mention, that I was kind of under that same impression.
okay.
But those changes were too radical.
I never heard what the changes were
Well,
at that meeting.
Mr. Jones gave a few answers, but we had hoped that some of the council members that wanted changes would have come to that meeting to suggest them that day, to discuss. So I didn't know what the changes were gonna be, and you didn't know either. And, Duck, you didn't know, did you?
No.
So, that's why we just came up with what we did, because I said, I'm not gonna lower the standards.
Right, but
know.
now they're saying there is no other changes. There never were any other changes. That's what we.
Well,
and
yeah,
it's
the
okay.
change is the deputy chief, or, I keep saying that, deputy city manager. That was the other, or city manager or deputy.
Right, I get that, but I'm just saying, if
That's all I know.
the mayor asked if there were any other changes to be made, and today no one said that there were.
Right.
But I was under the impression that there were, and that's fine. I'm willing to listen to what the changes were at the committee level, and we, as to vote, with the way we feel, and bring it to the full council.
Right.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I just wish it would get done. I don't know why we're arguing about the process for it.
Oh, I would agree. I don't want to see us spend all, the same amount of money again and come up empty. My question here would be too, and I don't think it's too early to establish this, we don't need last minute changes. So are we going to require, if we hire this company, that everyone who applies or at what point in the process takes a psychology or personality test? Are we doing that again? That needs to be put out front. I think that's one of the big objections I had, and several people here last time, is it was at the end of the process, So are we doing that or not, folks?
Kathy, what did that cost?
Is it 800 per?
I believe it was 700 per test.
And I felt like everybody that stayed in the meeting and listened to the analysis thought that it was a very good thing. Did anyone think that it
No,
wasn't?
I think it's good, and I think it would be a good idea for us to add it into this now, as we go into this new search, is to do that, because it was another tool in our toolbox
But
that really gave me, I can't speak for anybody else, it gave me a great insight.
But one of the candidates did exceptionally well, and yet you still didn't hire him. So what was the point of giving him the test? I don't understand.
Maybe he wasn't the candidate I thought that was the better candidate, and just because,
So you ignored the test then?
no, I didn't ignore the test.
Right, you didn't
I
hire the
thought
guy that
that
did well on it.
I thought the other person was the person I thought was going to be my best choice, but I couldn't hire him once he did the test. The other person I didn't think was my best choice, and even though he did do well on the test, when I had made a decision that this was the person I thought would be the right person. And once he did the test, I didn't feel that way any longer. So I'm not gonna vote for the other guy just based on that test. But I was very disappointed with the results for the one candidate.
So the answer is we're going to spend $800, $700 per person if there's 80, or how are we going to do this?
I think it could be added that this could be an option. This could be a requirement for you to take this test.
From the beginning, Pat?
Well,
Or,
it would be stated there. It wouldn't have to be a requirement.
well, I'm saying 800 times 80 people, you're getting up there in
No,
price.
it might be a requirement for you to take this personality test. And then if you don't want to apply, that's fine, but we haven't said if it will be a requirement. Who knows, maybe there'd be a great candidate and we don't need a test at all. This person is just head and shoulders above everybody else.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I think Larry, you're just saying the finalists would take the test, not everybody that.
It could be required.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
You're stating it could be required,
Could be
it's
required.
not saying that.
We decide we don't need it, we don't need it. I mean, some of the complaint I think I'm hearing is that we told the guy he has to take it, and we never told him in the beginning. So if that goes into our requirement that you may have to take this personality test, they know it up front.
I can see that as well in terms of the finalists. Once we get down to the finalists, then we should let them know that this test may be required. And so if we put it in on the front end, just only to the finalists, then we go from there. Because like I said, it was a very valuable tool
So
in the
we
toolbox.
don't, Betty, we don't tell, let's be hopeful. We don't tell the 45 people that all apply?
No, that's not what I'm
Are
saying.
you saying you tell them up front, but you don't do it till the finalists?
When the finalists come along, when we get to the finalists, if we have 80 to 100 candidates, those last finalists, whether that be 3 or whether that be 5, we insert that this isn't a requirement that we go through that person.
But you do that with the original posting, so they know, as they're sitting at their computer at home,
Exactly.
oh, I don't want to take a personality test, I'm not even going to apply.
Right.
So how many good candidates will say, this
I
council can't
don't
even
know if
decide
they
on?
want the job. I'm thinking if they want to go through the entire process, that would be one of the qualifications for the entire process.
No, I understand that. And my next question would be, how many good candidates might look at it, be on the
I
fence and
don't
go,
know.
they can't even decide what the requirements are until, they don't want to commit up front. They're saying, maybe down the road, I'll have to see a shrink.
What do you mean? We won't know what the requirements are. I believe that
No, I believe Councilman Mudrin proposed it as a you might have to do it. Not that you're definitely going to do it as a finalist. We'll decide later.
Well, I mean, Councilman Mudrin, hey, that's an opinion. I have an opinion. As
And what is
well.
yours then?
Yeah, so I'm good with that,
I'm announcing up front the finalists will take it.
Yeah, if we don't want to hit anybody on the curb, just let them know that this may be a possibility or an option for them to take at the end. And so it's something that they will know from the beginning. That will cut out the conversation I think that we had before.
But
where
they won't
nobody
know if you're
knew.
doing it for sure, just that we might spring it on them at the end. We'll make a decision at the end.
Can we just say they're gonna take it and don't have to let them take it, Kathy?
You can say it may be
So use the word
given at
maybe.
any point in
Yes,
time.
I mean,
But that's what Larry is saying, he has a issue with, am I gonna have to take it or am I not? Can we just say you have to take it and still not give it to them? As Sherry said, they might be over, maybe, I don't know.
Well, if they stand
Somebody
above
might be
everybody
just,
else.
Mayor?
knock us off our
Yeah.
feet, and we don't have to give them the test.
Kathy, could you ask Slavin what their opinion is on personality tests, and have they used them, and have they, people not applied because they didn't want to take a personality test, and maybe look at it that
I'll
way?
ask, yes.
Yeah, that's
Thank you.
let it go like that.
One last question. Is anybody up here, I think you asked it directly or indirectly, Mayor, anybody here have somebody in mind already? Somebody here local?
No.
Nope.
I do.
Nobody
I have
in
several
mind.
candidates I would interview. 2 of them applied last time, but there's
Right.
others. I've actually talked to a couple local people, like you were talking about doing, Pat, over the last year to gauge their interest. I can't imagine how anyone could be here a year and not have a candidate in mind. I find that very difficult to believe. I certainly do.
I don't find it difficult at all not to have a particular candidate.
You
after
can't
this
think of
time.
one person that you think might be good for this job after a year?
No, not really.
That's bizarre to me.
Not really, because I want to see the merits that they come up on. A lot of people that we interact with and that we go with, or we involve ourselves with, when it comes down to those qualifications, those recommendations, I don't have anybody else.
Well, aside from the two names you're alluding to that were, part of the final five last time, final six.
Right.
That turned out to be five. All the other names that were mentioned in that room don't meet the current.
No, they don't, but I think they'd be qualified. Every name, well, possibly. I certainly would give them an interview. I know them, versus a guy that's been a city manager for 2 years in, I don't know, nowhere, Texas, of 10,000 people. We're supposed to gauge whether he's gonna fit or not. We had a guy from Rhode Island, a guy from Wisconsin, so that's what you're gonna get again. Look,
Well, Mayor,
we
that's
all
why I
different
asked you.
experience. I've been through enough of these interviews. I can answer the questions. You get the same stock questions, the same stock answers. Anybody who's done the job has the knowledge to give the answer. And so it really is just a crapshoot. We've done this 3 times. I think we were lucky on one. I think we're unlucky on another one, and then we'll never know on this last one. So it's just my
That's
opinion.
why I asked you that question, because you did bring up that thought, that you thought that there might be people in the community that wouldn't qualify for our
Right.
job description. So that's why I asked you first out, is that the only change that's going to be made because of your comments?
Well, and that's why I did think there were other changes that were being considered, but I was told no to that. I know Councilman Morris, you thought so too.
I did, honestly, I did.
I think at our last meeting, I walked away with that the word or related to the deputy city manager was going to be the only inclusion into that. I think that's what I walked away with.
That's correct.
But Your Honor, if I might, we talk about the questions. Is there a way that we can revamp those questions to me? And you've gone through it a lot more times than I have. But the questions themselves, I would like to see if we can come up with some different questions. I don't know if anybody else thinks that way. But some of those questions we read to those interviewees were like, come on, really? Not to have to redo the question.
But yeah, what experience do you have
agree.
with labor unions? Everyone gives the same answer. Well, there's so many unions in my town. I've done grievances, I've done collective bargaining, negotiated. I mean, it's the same answer.
Yeah,
Just
well,
different
yeah,
people
but
give-
now you gotta admit, there are some questions in there that you would ask a person that is, going for a high-level position as this. I wouldn't even give it a thought to ask them that question. And you know the questions I'm talking about.
Right.
So, maybe we need to look at that. Maybe the questions can get more in-depth, and bring out more information. That's just a thought, but I really don't like the questions.
So the motion's on the floor.
Yes.
Oh, one last question, Kathy. Did Flavin give it an estimated window, what they thought it would take? 3 months, 6 months, 10 months?
60 to 90 days. That was their estimate.
That's quick, okay.
Are we publishing this, or are they just handpicking people to bring to us? How are we doing this?
They're publishing everything.
Wow. Last 3 searches took, what, 6, 8 months?
Yeah.
I have a question, Mayor. Kathy, you said 3 to 6 months, yet before you said that he does have one candidate in mind that he thinks will fit the position. So is that a friend of his or what?
Who are we speaking of? Slavin?
Yeah. You stood up there and that's what you said. He will guarantee good candidates and he has one in mind or something to that effect.
I don't remember saying that. I'm sorry. I apologize. He has a network that he has access to of candidates that are interested in specific positions, including city manager positions. So he obviously would have people in mind for this role. because of the size of the city and the requirements, yes, but.
So if he has those folks in mind, if he posts it, is he gonna send those folks a separate thing or just send it out there and hopefully that they apply?
He'll include them, he'll probably reach out to them.
Sounds like HR all over again.
They'll still have to go through the entire process.
I
They won't skip
understand.
any steps.
Thank you.
Ms. Mayor, so the 60 to 90 days, that's complete, that's with the city manager, that's just when we start the process of interviewing after the
No, his estimated time frame is 60 to 90 days complete.
complete of having the city manager. Okay.
Makes me a little nervous.
I think it's positive.
I do too.
It depends if, you know, it makes me wonder, our decisions in the past, you know, using the same company, it took 6, 7, 8 months.
Well,
Are
there's
we
a motion,
rushing it?
there's a motion on the floor. Let's
Okay.
vote it through. We're down.
It was motioned and seconded to approve Council Memo 352-20, authorization to approve a contract with Slavin Management Consultants for an executive search for city manager for the city of Joliet. Councilwoman Gavin,
Aye.
Councilman Hug,
No.
Councilman Morris,
No,
Councilman Mudrin,
Aye.
Councilwoman Coleman,
I can't see spending the money at this time. No.
Councilwoman Reardon,
Aye.
Councilman Turk,
Aye.
Councilman Dickinson.
Aye.
Motion carried 5-3. Next on the agenda is public comments. We did not receive any email comments for this night's meeting. However, we did receive several requests to speak this evening. And I believe we have the first caller on the line.
We have James on the
James? James?
This is, good evening, it's Mayor Odeker. Can you give your name, address, and comment, please?
Hi, good evening, Mayor, Joliet City Council, meeting attendees, and fellow citizens. My name is Jim Richards Sr., and I've been a lifelong resident of Joliet, and a resident in the Reedwood neighborhood for the last 31 and a half years. I'm calling in to comment on the irritating and illegal practice of setting off fireworks in the Reedwood neighborhood and in general throughout the city of Joliet. The police have a truly long uphill battle to regain public trust during these changing times. That being said, they need our help to enforce the laws as we realize that the police cannot be everywhere. We need to be the eyes and ears in our neighborhoods, and we need to stand up for our rights to a safe, secure, and quiet area to live in. For the last 2 weeks, it has been anything but that in the air. There's even someone in the neighborhood that was blasting some type of air horn to get them to stop the fireworks, as ridiculous as that sounds, but it happened. The last weekend, there was a house on the corner of West Marion and Earl Streets whose residents were lighting up the sky, scaring numerous pets in the area and disrupting the homeowners in the Reedwood area. Yes, police were called and they visited the property and spoke to the people, and the fireworks stopped for a short time. Then it started up again and continued to well past 10:30 p.m. Examples of the violations can be found on pages, comments on Nextdoor, Facebook, Patch, Herald News. Illinois has a law to ban the possession, use, and sale of fireworks and calls for local authorities to be able to confiscate any fireworks items. Violations of the Illinois Code is considered a Class A misdemeanor, punishable up to a year in jail and a fine of $2,500. Now, Joliet has specific ordinances for dealing with this also, both for fireworks and loud and unnecessary noises. These are liable for a $500 fine each. Joliet's Code of Ordinances also states that encouraging violation of the codes is in itself a violation, which means every person in attendance at the residence at the time could and possibly should be charged. I realize the members of the council may already know this information, but I'm stating it here as a matter of record. It's gotten to the point that many have just taken the lay down and play dead and maybe it'll go away tax. There was a post on Nextdoor in regards to tonight's meeting where a resident said, and I quote, "Oh yes, like that has ever accomplished anything." everyone knows not to waste their breath. They know exactly what they're doing. They choose not to care about or show basic forms of compassion for people that aren't living in their neighborhood. And a subsequent post from the same person saying in response to someone else calling into this meeting tonight, "Let me know how that works out for you, LOL." Now, the neighborhoods of Joliet should be able to assist the mayor, the council, the police and fire departments, and any other municipal regulators in the performance of their duties with regard to ordinance violations. My personal theory is that an involved community can move mountains. What I'm suggesting is that the community be able to work directly with the Joliet Area Neighborhood Organization Policing Team in developing a program that would allow neighborhood organizations to file complaints as an organization, to allow 2 or more non-related persons from said neighborhood where the infractions were witnessed to submit evidence, either recorded in person or by affidavit that could be used as necessary cause to issue a citation of summons by the city to the offending party. This would isolate and insulate the witnesses from any type of direct retribution by the offenders, as they are offending the local community at all. They are not being deprived of meeting their accusers. I want to thank the council and the mayor for allowing me to take this time to make my comments and observations to this forum, and I bid you all a good evening.
Thank you. Kathy, this is Mayor Roderker. Can you give your name, address, and comment, please?
Yes, good evening. Kathy Spieler, Joliet, Illinois. I'm calling in tonight addressing, this is a board member from our Reedwood Neighborhood Association. The fireworks are out of control. They have been since the beginning of May. Our board gets nightly reports and complaints. They are calling the police. They have videos of offenders, but we don't understand why this is not being enforced. It's illegal. It's against our city ordinance. On the JPD page, it states there's a $500 fine. What is the reason why we cannot get this enforced? Then a few other issues to speak on as a resident. I wanted to thank our District 5 Councilman Terry Morris for making sure one of our main roads in our Reedwood neighborhood was repaired. Much appreciated, Councilman Morris. In regards to the city manager search, if you wait to get 9 people to agree, Steve Jones will be here forever. And I really hope that's not the goal. Let's just vote and get someone else in here. We need this badly. Please work together. I also have a question which you probably will not answer tonight. I can call in or someone can drop me an email, but is Preston Heights considered out of our Joliet city limits? I thought it was township. I'm just wondering if that's the case or not. I didn't think that the residents in that area could vote for our Joliet city officials. Just a question. And lastly, thank you, Mayor, for all your hard work for our city, and know that your residents stand with you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
We have Margie on one.
Margie, it's Mayor Roderker. Can you give your name, address, and comment, please?
Margie Seapond, Joliet. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. At the May 19th council meeting, a presentation was made regarding the existing conditions of Southside Industrial that included a color-coded map indicating existing, ongoing, pending, and finally, potential industrial warehouse development. That map rang alarms among Southside residents, and several things did not go unnoticed. First, on slide 6 of the presentation, it did not go unnoticed that a portion of the Joliet Country Club was included and coded as potential industrial. Is the city entertaining this project idea for warehousing? We are extremely leery that a plan may be moving forward, and it is not without cause for the following reasons. 1, Rock Joliet, owners of the country club, have recently submitted 2 potential entrance schematics for their concept plan for over 1.4 million square feet in warehousing on the Joliet Country Club. 2, for the entrance schematics, all included streets are residential with load limits, with one actually being a private road. Dimension measurements taken were witnessed by residents. 3. Rock has marked an overwhelming majority of trees to be cut down. 4. Extensive ground testing has been conducted. And 5. Most recently, residents have noted a change in water runoff and flooding from the country club. We need to know what is going on there. Councilwoman Quillman, you spoke at length during last week's meeting regarding the residents' need for information for the Dunkin' restaurant. We would like the same. Is Rock proceeding in some way to force a warehouse development? We don't know, but what we do know is that nothing should be happening there. And we call upon the city to send an advisory letter to Rock stating the same as soon as possible. Mistrust is growing, and quite frankly, a warehouse project there should be a hard no now, since the concept plan would create an industrial island surrounded by residential. This is absurd. Rock took a risk in acquiring the property, and investments don't always pan out. No one is guaranteed a return in real estate or basically any other investment for that matter. Next, during the 2019 campaign season, Councilman Morris of the 5th District, which includes the South Side, supported a moratorium on warehouses. However, at the April 17th council meeting, Mr. Morris voted yes to North Point and then brought forward a scaled-back version of the warehouse moratorium to simply apply only to Route 53. This gained some support from council. But then, just over a month later, on May 19th, during the Southside Industrial presentation, it also did not go unnoticed that additional potential warehousing was in fact indicated on Route 53 and throughout the South Side, without any mention of a moratorium, not even the scaled-back version. Rather, it was recommended that the future of Southside Industrial would be directed to the Economic Development Committee and could be handled in-house together with city staff ahead of the comprehensive plan. This cannot happen. Residents must have a voice. Quality of life and diversified economic development are of feverish concern, and therefore direct resident input is necessary. Community meetings throughout the South Side must be scheduled for resident input, since yes, City of Joliet residents do reside on the South Side.
Erica, it's Mayor Odekirk. Can you give your name, address, and comment, please?
I'm Mayor Odekirk on City Council. This is Erica Holmes, Joliet, Illinois. Today, I stand as a community leader and represent, of course, the Preston Heights Neighborhood Council and the southeast side of Joliet, that's within the city of Joliet. Coming to you tonight to talk about the importance of diversified economic development for the south side of Joliet, which is the process of improving the quality of life of the south side residents of Joliet. This involves objectives such as social well-being, economic growth, and sustainability. Examples of that could be infrastructure, safety, and economy. We do not need any more warehouses, but you guys already know that, right? The Southside Initiative, along with Joliet Leadership Coalition and other community-based organizations, have come together to help the needs of the community. We now need the City of Joliet to do the same for the South Side of Joliet. We need to envision a collective strategy for Joliet South Side and to have a vibrant ecosystem. We need to have a vibrant ecosystem that has true planning for the South Side of Joliet, such as the following: having grocery stores, pharmacy, restaurants, shopping centers. We know that you have pushed back the comprehensive plans for the city until 2021. The City of Joliet needs to meet the needs of all the residents, which includes the South Side of Joliet. And a diversified economy on the South Side creates a sustainability cycle of economic activity where businesses continue to feed off one another and grow larger as the economy grows. With that, I'm so sorry, I'm losing my voice. It's time out for the warehousing. We want to grow. We want to not die off. Given the city's current financial state, us working together could be a win-win for both. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I believe this is the last caller.
Robert, this is Mayor Rodeker. Can you give your name, address, and comment, please?
Megan Cooper, Joliet.
Thanks,
the
Megan.
South Side doesn't matter, apparently. The proposal of a Dunkin' Donuts at Six Corners warrants community meetings with the owners, community input, and a traffic study. Wow. This is an unbelievable amount of proactive concern for the West Side community from Councilwoman at large, Jan Quillman, over the traffic impact of a Dunkin' Donuts is amazing. Ignoring the South Side traffic impacts of warehouse development, truck stops, a truck terminal, as well as a recently approved North Point, how much more do you and the rest of City Council think the South Side can take? A more adequate representation of the City of Joliet brochure should read, "Welcome to the City of Joliet, home of the rubber stamp on approval on warehousing. If you want it, you got it. Warehousing, truck stops, and terminals. Whatever you want, we'll approve it, as long as it's on the South Side. We welcome you to build on any land on the South Side. We'll even annex it in. We encourage you and welcome you to build within the South Side residential neighborhoods next to churches, schools, senior living, and in backyards. The South Side residents and families don't matter. Want to bring in more trucks? No problem. We'll just disregard their quality of life. Want to build in the middle of a neighborhood and use residential roads? No problem. It's the South Side. They don't matter. We're willing and ready. We're improving local roads through the community to accommodate you. Welcome to the City of Joliet. It's because of this welcome mat that we are now faced with potential warehouse development on the Joliet Country Club. The Joliet Country Club is a staple within the community in Joliet, surrounded by homes, churches, schools, two of the biggest senior high-rise facilities, and down the street from emergency services that serve this side of town. Yes, it's because of you, the City of Joliet, and the Joliet City Council's rubber stamp on warehouses that there's a belief. Open land, build a warehouse. Case in point, the Joliet Country Club. The City of Joliet, Jan Quillman, you immediately stood up against the potential warehouse development on the Joliet Country Club. Are you willing to lead charge in blocking warehouse development on the Joliet Country Club? Something is going on, and the Southside residents shouldn't have to live with fears of the unknown regarding what's happening with the Joliet Country Club. Better yet, where are you, City Council Terry Cruz? This is your district. You, along with at-large members, are direct representation for the Southside constituents. Where do you stand on the Joliet Country Club and potential warehouse development on the South Side? What happened to the overall moratorium? Your constituents need to know publicly. Southside residents deserve and demand proactive concerns and action for the first economic development. Therefore, in order to achieve this, we need community meetings with council prior to any future development. Larry Hubbs and the Economic Development Committee will no longer set the course for Southside development. The community will have input and the residents' voices will be heard and no longer ignored when decisions are being made. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Robert Cooper's registered as well, so I'm not sure if that's on the same line or not because they were not able to get two different connections. So Robert? Okay, so she did hang up. So that concludes our public comments this evening. Next is mayor and council comments.
Betty.
You know, I want to make just one comment, and I want to clear up something from last week. You heard me say something, and it wasn't targeted at anybody on this council. Those of you that know me, what comes up comes out. And so I apologize to Councilwoman Quillman if you even thought, I texted you right after that, if you thought that that was something, because the mayor texted me and asked me, did I swear at you? No, I was talking to somebody else. I have to admit, I am a Christian under construction. That might not be the last time you hear me say something that wasn't appropriate at the time, but I was talking to somebody at my house. Okay, so I just wanted to put that out there to clear the air.
Betty, we've all said things we regret by accident.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Let
And
it
when
go.
it went,
Let it go. I did. I got a big kick out of it. Okay.
okay, good. Because you got some folk out there that just said I just cussed you out, you know. But anyway, having said that, the one thing that I'm excited about right now, as you all know, during COVID, the Forest Park Community Center shut down for a while because of the stay-at-home, and then the cause of my staff was furloughed. Happy to say, we are back open and we are running strong on Thursday starting at noon. We have a food drop. Our operation has changed, so all you have to do now is just drive up. So I'm just putting that out there, that anybody that needs food on Thursday at noon, please come up and see us. We are excited to get back to work. Thank you.
Terry?
Nothing else.
Enjoy stage 4, everyone, starting this weekend, I hope.
Terry?
You know, I'm gonna bring up something I don't think we brought up, and I don't know why, but remind everybody to get counted for the census. We've never said that, I don't think, at one of our comments, and we can do it online, or you can come down to City Hall, but it's never been more important than it is right now. So get out there and do your census.
Right? Jan?
Well, I have a question for Steve Jones. I would like to know what's going on with the Joliet Country Club. Because I went on record and Councilwoman Gavin agreed with me, I was not gonna vote for that, for any more warehouses over on that south side, or that property particularly. So with what the caller said earlier, could we get some clarification here?
Right, I was wondering the same thing as I was sitting in the conference room. I think the first caller that referenced it talked about a map that had been put together with a presentation. It was either 3 meetings ago or 4 meetings ago. That was Derek. He had identified several properties, not that we're marketing as industrial or manufacturing, but you know, there are folks in the community doing that. So he had made a point just saying that, you know, there are some brokers out there who have owners of property that would like to get industrial development. Doesn't necessarily mean that the city is in favor of that. So I was a little surprised that suddenly this has come up. Certainly we're not, I mean, we've told the developers from our perspective as staff that there's no support for this. So we don't know whether they're moving forward with the project, you know, in terms of going through a plan commission process, hoping to get to council, or whether that's something where there's been some activity that we're not aware of. So I'm as surprised as you are.
So we really don't know what's going on over there then, because there's been no proposals, correct?
The last discussion we had on a staff basis goes back, I want to say it was November, December of last year, when they were first, you know, coming up with floating this idea. And certainly they got no support from us in terms of giving them encouragement. So I just don't know the answer to this. We'll follow up. We'll find out who might be out there representing them, but nothing's changed.
Okay.
Council's been very clear, as has staff.
So normally, thanks, Steve. So normally I do not address a caller that calls in, but I wanted to make that very clear that I have not contacted you as the at-large person because I know you guys don't want that over there. I know you're concerned you don't want any more warehouses, and I did say that before. I would not vote for that. And I don't particularly want to vote for any more warehouses. So I will leave you in the loop because, as you just heard, we don't know anything about what's going on over there. There's been no proposals, and the city manager has told the developer that he doesn't think there's a consensus, I shouldn't say consensus, but he doesn't think that the council would entertain that at this time. So If you want to call me, my number is posted, 815-726-7071, and we can talk about this. And I just hope that everybody stays well and is safe with this new opening on Friday and the weekend. Get to some normalcy, but please wear your mask and conduct your 6 feet apart. Thank you.
Just a quick question. Krista, I think Allison confirmed, is this meeting being televised for people to be able to see?
It is, it's also being streamed on the website.
Have they been looking at that same graphic for the last hour?
No, we're actually able to see what is being streamed outside. I believe there is an issue with the
Okay, all right. I just thought people
monitor on the sides.
were looking at the same question for the last hour. So. Okay, thank you.
No, nothing there.
We're up on Monday, Tuesday next week, right?
Correct, pre-council at 5:30 and council at 6:30.
Okay.
Well, not next week after.
I'm sorry, the 7th, July 7th.
Thank you.
Thank you for.
Pre-council's on the 6th.
Got it. Thank you.
I did receive a request for closed session, so is there a motion to go into closed session to discuss personnel or pending or threatened litigation, after which the meeting will be adjourned?
So moved.
Second.
Been motion and seconded to approve. Councilman Hug,
Aye.
Councilman Morris,
Aye.
Councilman Mudrin,
Aye.
Councilwoman Coleman,
Aye.
Councilwoman Reardon,
Aye.
Councilman Turk,
Aye.
Councilman Dickinson,
Aye.
Councilwoman Gavin.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Total Info Sports.